dear guests, distinguished delegates, colleagues and friends. It is a great pleasure for me to open the first expert meeting on the revision of the WMA Declaration of Taipei on ethical consideration regarding health, databases, and biobanks. First of all, I would like to thank the Taiwan Medical Association for organizing this meeting in a beautiful city and your wonderful hospitality. Thank you very much. We have two parts in this meeting, in our session. The first, we will start this meeting with opening remarks. We have distinguished guests, and I will start that it is a great honor for me to invite our First Lady, the new President of the World Medical Association, Dr. Jacqueline Kitulu. Please.
Thank you, Professor Hagay. So distinguished colleagues and honored guests, good afternoon. And it's a privilege to join you today for this important expert meeting on the revision of the Declaration of Taipei, DOT as we call it. And I thank our hosts, the Taiwan Medical Association, for their warm hospitality. And I acknowledge the dedication of the DOT Workgroup under the leadership of Professor Hagay. So as advances in data science, artificial intelligence, and biobanking accelerate, our ethical frameworks must evolve with clarity, purpose, and global coherence. The Declaration of Taipei remains a cornerstone for safeguarding the rights, dignity, and trust of individuals whose data and biological materials enable medical progress. So this meeting offers us a unique opportunity to strengthen that foundation, ensuring that governance of health databases and biobanks reflects emerging realities while upholding the unwavering principles of autonomy, transparency, equity, and justice. I'm grateful to each of you for your expertise and commitment. Your contributions over the coming days will shape guidance that is both ethically robust and practically relevant for physicians, researchers, and health systems worldwide. I look forward to our collective deliberations and to a successful and productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It is my honor now to invite our meeting host, the President of the Taiwan Medical Association, Dr. Cheng Hsiang-Kuo.
Thank you, Dr. Hagay. Your pronunciation is very good in Mandarin.
I tried to practice it at least 1 week.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Hagay, Chair, WMA Declaration of Taipei Workgroup. Dr. Jacqueline Kitulu, President of World Medical Association. Dr. Jack Resnick, Chair of Council, World Medical Association. Dr. Otmar Kloiber, Secretary General, World Medical Association. Dr. Yong Park, President-elect, World Medical Association. I met Dr. Park about 1 month, 2 months ago. He's my home in Korea. Okay. Dr. Wang Legislator, Legislator Yuan, Taiwan. Dr. Chiu Tai-Yuan, Honorary President, Taiwan Medical Association, and the former Minister of Health and Welfare, Taiwan. Good afternoon, distinguished experts from around the world, esteemed partners of the World Medical Association, and representatives from government, agency, medical association, and the patient groups. It's a profound honor to inaugurate to the WMA Taipei Declaration expert meeting here in Taipei. I wish to express my deepest gratitude to all who have dedicated themselves to this field over the years. Your sustained commitment has made it possible for us to further strengthen ethical standards in clinical practice and research at a time when data intensity and rapid cross-boundary information flows define the global landscape. The WMA Taipei Declaration, first announced in 2016 in this very city, centers on the governance of health database and biobanks. In the face of emerging challenges such as generative artificial intelligence and digital health innovation and multi-center research, it serves as a timely reminder of the importance of maintaining balance between public interest and the protection of individual rights. The WMA Declaration of Taipei is anchored in three fundamental principles: digital and autonomy. All data and specimen collection, storage, and use must be based on volunteer and informed consent, accompanied by the right of withdrawal, independent oversight, and transparency. The establishment and the operation of database must undergo independent ethical review and clearly disclose their purpose, risk assess mechanism, retention and destruction policies, returnable results, and the regulatory framework governing cross-border transfer and commercial use. Public interest and equity. Research must adhere to scientific rigor, ensure a fair allocation of risk and benefits, provide a heightened safeguard for vulnerable population, and promote meaningful community engagement. This meeting will focus on three key areas. First, refining consent models. Second, enhancing transparency in data governance, and defining legal and ethical boundaries for the secondary use of data in the context of artificial intelligence. We look forward to reaching a shared understanding of governance framework that will enable ethics committees and to strengthen their oversight through standard indicators, templates for data and specimen transfer agreements, incident reporting mechanism, and remediation procedures, while ensuring that cultural sensitivities and community interests are duly respected. Taipei is more than a geographic name. It symbolizes our cooperative commitment of professionalism, ethical integrity, and social trust. May the Declaration of Taipei continue to resonate alongside the WMA Declaration of Helsinki, safeguarding human rights and advancing research, innovation, and human health welfare. I wish this meeting a very success. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to Taiwan. Thank you.
Taiwan Medical Association. And now we... sorry. Thank you very much, the President of the Taiwan Medical Association, Dr. Chen. And now I have a great privilege to invite the Honorary President of Taiwan Medical Association and former Minister of Health and Welfare in Taiwan, Dr. Tai-Yuan Hsu.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Jiang Hagay, Chair WMA Declaration of Taipei Workgroup, Dr. Jacqueline, Kitulu, President of the World Medical Association, Dr. Cheng-Hsu, President of Taiwan Medical Association, Professor Wang Cheng-Hsu, Legislator Taiwan, and Professor of Chang University, and Dr. Christopher Lindpong, Chair, MEC, and my old friend, John Young Park, from Korea, President-elected. Distinguished guest, distinguished exporter, honored guest. It is a great pleasure to welcome exporters from around the world to Taipei for this first division meeting of the WMA Declaration of Taipei, which addresses the ethical considerations regarding the use of health data and biobanks. The World Medical Association Declaration of Taipei was officially launched during the WMA General Assembly held in Taipei in 2016. At that time, I have the honor of serving as the president of Taiwan Medical Association and was the responsible for hosting the entire assembly. The 2016 WMA General Assembly was resounding success, and the issuing of the WMA Declaration of Taipei was not only a great privilege for the Taiwan Medical Association, but also a point of pride for Taiwan. Since the declaration's issuance in 2016, the global community has increasingly confronted ethical controversies surrounding the acquisition of health data and the challenges posed by the application of AI in biobanks. Consequently, there is indeed a pressing need to adjust the content of the Taipei Declaration to reflect the rapidly changing landscape of the contemporary health care environment. In my own experience, during my tenure as a legislator and later as the Minister of Health and Welfare in Taiwan, I participated in numerous, often contentious discussions regarding the revision of the Human Biobank Management Act and the utilization of national health insurance database. The level of controversy surrounding this issue was significant. Therefore, the launch of this WMA Taipei Declaration Division Export Meeting is highly meaningful. It not only signified the world's increasing emphasis on medical human rights, but also established an important reference point for future related regulations. This work will be invaluable in enhancing the quality of medical care and deepening our respect for medical human rights globally. I once again extend my sincere thanks to the WMA and all the experts for your dedication and contribution. I hope you all leave Taipei with wonderful memory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tai-Yuan Shu. Now we actually finished the first session, and we'll start session 1, which is actually session 2. So before I will go to session 2, I would like to thank all our important guests who gave open remarks for this meeting. I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you. Now we will move to the second part, which is called session 1 of the conference, which deal with the history and ethical principles of the Declaration of Taipei. Therefore, I would like to invite my co-chair, who is sitting near me, Professor Wang Cheng-Hsu, to join me, and he's here. And I would ask all the other friends to come, which is Johan Snædal, Hans van Delden, and Otmar Kloiber. Please join us, sit with us. We'll continue the next. Whatever convenient, it's okay.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Hagay. Let's start the first or second session, no matter how. Okay. Our first speaker is the past president of the World Medical Association, Dr. Snædal. We'd like to respect him as the father of the 2016 revision. He will begin with a 20-minute presentation on the history of the Declaration of Taipei. Dr. Yong, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Wang and Dr. Hagay, chairs of the session. First of all, I would like to thank the elegant hosts of this meeting, the Taiwanese Medical Association, for this wonderful venue. The Israeli Medical Association, that is leading the work of revision of Declaration of Taipei, and World Medical Association, but we are here in their name. So I have been along for a while, so I was there at the beginning of this journey that started actually in 1998. How can I switch? So it all started here. It actually started with an entrepreneur and a visionary, Dr. Stefansson, who had been served and worked in the United States for 20 years. And he had become a professor of neuropathology at Harvard in Boston. He managed to, when he moved to Iceland in 1996, to bring with him $800 million of risk capital to establish a research company called Decode Genetics, which is still existing today and is still one of the strongest genetic laboratories in the world. So he was a visionary, and he knew, and his colleagues, the power of data. So what they intended to do was to collect data, and they had two data sets that they had to their disposal. One was a genealogical database that was containing the names of around 1 million Icelanders 1,000 years back and how they were related to each other. This they had acquired by buying it from a private enterprise. The second database was that they were developing themselves, containing genetic information from all the projects they were doing, and this was escalating quite fast. But then it was the third database, and he managed to get the support of the politicians. So we at the Icelandic Medical Association, we knew with two days advance that a new legislation was going to be discussed at the parliament, allowing the company Decode Genetics to collect health information from all Icelanders. And when I mean all health data, it is actually all health data, from private clinics, from the hospitals, retrospectively and prospectively. Both hard data, like results from various investigations, but also text. So this created a lot of fury among the doctors, those that had actually collected these data and put them into medical records. And there was a very fierce opposition, not only by the medical profession, with the Icelandic Medical Association in the forefront, but also by ethicists. And this case was quite soon brought to our colleagues in the Nordic countries. We call it the Nordic Council, and discussed there. and from there it came to the World Medical Association. So our representatives came to the council meeting in Chile in 1999, and actually, which is quite unusual, the ministry itself sent 2 representatives all the way from Reykjavik to Santiago de Chile in the spring of 1999 to talk for their case, which was in vain because the WMA immediately saw the importance of this and the wide implications it could have as an example to be used throughout the world. So it immediately started a work on ethical guidelines on the use of health data, not biomaterial at that time. And the intention was, as you can imagine, a very broad scope from the beginning, because this big data set combined of the 3 data sets were supposed to be not only used for research, but also anyone could ask the allowance to use the data for their purposes. They had to go through a process, of course, and we never know how that would go because it never realized. So the intention, and then we had a work group of WMA chaired by the British Medical Association, the late Appleyard, Professor Appleyard, and as I said, the intention was to address this in a very broad way. So this became a statement adopted in Washington, D.C. in 2002. Statements of WMA never get names of the places where they adopted, only declarations, which is the highest rank of our policies. So this statement did not include ethical use of biomaterial, only health information. And actually this policy did not gain a lot of attention at that time. Then we proceed forward as 10 years. So at the General Assembly in Fortaleza 2013, it was decided to have a major revision of this statement. And we had an extended work group of 9 persons, or 9 medical associations. And the process of revision was open, which was at that time rather unusual. So it was announced widely that the WMA was actually revising their ethical guidelines of use of health data and biomaterial. And this created quite a lot of interest, so almost 100 institutions and individuals responded with comments, smaller and bigger. And we had meetings throughout, not as extensive as in this case. We had meetings in Europe and we had meetings in Seoul, Korea. So it took some time. This was the first time we had entered this type of consultation, to my knowledge at least. So it was adopted here in Taipei in 2016 and got the name Declaration of Taipei. This declaration has gained some attention, but not as much as we had wished for. And it has now a potential to become one of the central policies of WMA, and that is exactly the aim of the current revision, to upgrade this in the eyes of those that are using health data. So the main issue of this work was to ensure personal autonomy and dignity when donating or sharing specimen or data. So that is on one hand how we are using the ethical foundations we have in our work, and on the other hand, to maximize the use of information contained in a database or biobank, because these are very powerful and valuable tools in research. actually also for other means. But that is another story. So Declaration of Taipei, it was aligned to the Declaration of Helsinki in the first paragraph, and also the 2024 revision of DOH mentioned DOT as well. So now they are referring to each other, as you can see. So in the Declaration of Taipei, in first paragraph, the Declaration of Helsinki lays down ethical principles for medical research involving human subjects, etc. And there at the end, and obtaining informed consent for using identifiable human biological material and data. This is referring to Helsinki Declaration, and you can see the meaning of informed consent. That is one of the central issues here. And then it specifies its own aims, that this declaration, the DOT, is intended to cover the collection, storage, and use of identifiable data and biological material beyond the individual care of patients. And this opens up for a very broad scope. I will come back to this issue of identifiable data. So some key principles of data DOT. One is the identifiable data and material. As you said, this sounds simple, but at closer look, the identifiable information could be traced to a specific individual or a small group based on the content of the information, for example, individuals with orphan diseases, to mention one example. And the identifiable material could be traced to individuals by genetic sequencing. So I think that identification, de-identification, anonymization, de-anonymization are some concepts that I think are more or less obsolete. Everything can be identified, more or less. We have, of course, in this our central ethical principles: dignity, autonomy, privacy, and confidentiality. And then, this is addressed to physicians, even though we will, for sure, also like other medical professions, use this one. But physicians have specific obligations, both ethical and legal, as stewards, protecting information provided by the patients. And these are the same principles as in DOH on research of human participation, and also in line with the provisions in the International Code of Medical Ethics. But it's actually not only meant for physicians, even though they are addressed in that way. And that is something that will be mentioned in the revision ahead. So while the declaration is adopted for physicians, WMA holds that these principles should be upheld by all of the individuals, like it said in DOH. And also that is mirrored in DOT in paragraph 2. In healthcare provision, health information is gathered by physicians or other members of the medical team to record healthcare events and to aid physicians in the ongoing care of the patients. And those of you that were here this morning, you could hear that in Taiwan, there is a very, the teamwork is a cornerstone of the work in medical profession, and physicians are most often the leaders of the team. Then you come to another big issue, which is consent. So this is paragraph 11 in DOT. The collection, storage, and use of data and biological material from individuals capable of giving consent must be voluntary. If the data and biological material are collected for a given research project, the specific, free, and informed consent of the participants must be obtained in accordance with the Declaration of Helsinki. So far, so good. So this is addressing the consent issue, which is more or less addressing how it should be in a solitary research project, and it's totally in line with DOH. But databases and biobanks for multiple indefinite use, they are, however, very much common, and then the issue of consent gets tricky. So this was dealt with in the next paragraph, which was very carefully worded in paragraph 12. If the data or biological material collected and stored in a health database or a biobank for multiple and indefinite use Consent is only valid if the concerned individuals have been adequately informed about, and then it was followed by 10 provisions. So the declaration does not explicitly allow for the use of data without any consent. So this might not be in line with reality. So the information that we need to give to those that are giving data or material, so they should be informed of the purpose, the risks and burdens, the nature of the data, the procedures for return of results, including incidental findings, which is one of the big topics in our work, the use of access, privacy, and etc. So I sense that in practice, not many individuals are actually informed of all these provisions. But this is stated in this declaration, and we have to discuss to what extent we are following our highest ethical principles in theory, and to what extent we are looking at how it is actually done in practice. So data from regional national data are being used without consent, but with some requirements. So we have in most of our countries data protection authorities that are overlooking the use of data in these repositories and others. And also we have the need for approval in the case of research ethics committee for on the use of data in databases. So there are in place some risk management for this. So, but we have to face that data gathered on social media, with or without the use of AI, is increasingly used for health data, often combined with other personal data. So this is mostly unregulated, and this is one of the big black boxes we need to address in this coming revision. Rights of individuals, they should have the right to request for and be provided information about how the data is used, and as well as they can provide some corrections of mistakes or omissions, as it's said in paragraph 14. And then at any time and without reprisal to alter the consent or to ask for the identifiable data to be withdrawn. There is a catch here. For example, many of big data are for public health issues, for cancer registries, etc. And you are not allowed, according to law, to opt out of those. You are not allowed to ask any of this data from you to be withdrawn. And that is, of course, a reason for that, which I will not go into. And then there is the issue of intellectual property. Special consideration should be given to the possible exploitation of intellectual property, protections for ownership of materials, rights, etc. So these should be addressed in a policy in a transparent manner and cover the rights of all stakeholders. So this actually is also covered in the current version of DOT. And then there are some details of the governance of health databases and biobanks with the main objects of protection of individuals, transparency, participation and inclusion, and accountability. Finally, to establish the ethical framework for the use of health data and biomaterial this is an everlasting challenge. And as you can see, we are moving in ever more rapidly, as Jack Resnick put it this morning. We are seeing acceleration of the processes of AI today. So information on health of individuals, it's not only kept in databases inside the health services, but increasingly into commercial repositories, and some of them of gigantic sizes. But however, the use of big data is of course benefiting individuals and societies. But how to handle this in an ethical way needs to be stipulated by respected institutions, and World Medical Association is very trusted and in fact an authority in medical ethics and should be leading on how to use health data and biomaterial in an ethical way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you very much for the very excellent presentation. Just quickly, Dr. Snædal mentioned the shift from the simple privacy to the complexity of big data. As a legislator in Taiwan, I face this challenge every day. We must balance the medical innovation with human rights. I believe the trust is the currency of biobanking. So without public health, there's no data and no science. So please we'll move to the next
Thank you
speaker.
very much
You.
For your excellent lecture. So we will move now to the next speaker. It is my honor to introduce Professor Hans van Delden. Professor van Delden is a professor of medical ethics at the University Medical Center of Utrecht University in the Netherlands. There, he is also leads the project on patient and public participation in care, education, and research. He has worked for many years as a practicing nursing home physicians and has published widely on the practice and ethics of end-of-life decisions, research ethics, and ethical issues in the care for the elderly and ethics of biomedical innovation. He served as the chair of the International Bioethics Committee of UNESCO and also served as the president of the Council of International Organization of Medical Sciences. Professor van Delden served as an ethics advisor to the 2024 revision of the WMA Declaration of Helsinki. Please, Dr. Hans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. I will also, as the previous speaker did, take a sort of historical perspective and also share with you my experience as a chair of the Utrecht Biobank Committee and how that landscape has changed. Maybe to introduce me a little bit further, indeed, I'm a medical doctor and practiced for a long time, but stopped practicing when the tasks kept piling up, as some of you will recognize. My research interests have been stated by the chair already, and indeed, the presidency of CIOMS is maybe most relevant here, because CIOMS has their own ethical guidelines. Some of you will know those. And because we do not want to be in competition with the WMA, we actually think it's very fruitful if the CIOMS guidelines and the WMA guidelines in this area are kept very close to each other. So that's why I served as an advisor to the revision of the DOH and also now for the DOT. Relevant also is indeed the fact that I was the chair of the Utrecht Biobank Committee. That will stop in a few weeks, but so far I've been doing that work in Utrecht. Yeah, this is of course clear. I mean, we've been moving away from clinical research as we knew it to a lot of bio and data banking. That is for you without further, needs no explanation, of course. Clinical research, of course, still happens, is still very important. Let's not forget that. But of course, we are here to talk about biobanking and data banking. And when we started, the discussion in the Netherlands started early 2000s, not as early as in Iceland, but pretty much related also to, of course, those developments. We thought that those were the prime ethical challenges: how to deal with privacy and confidentiality, how to organize consent, return of results. I mean, if some, let's say, clinically relevant findings do emerge from the work on the data or the specimen, then how should that be returned? Would there be ownership of any findings and commercial use? And in some ways, this book actually has played an important role, at least in my view and in the Netherlands. You will know it, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. You will realize that some of you have worked with HeLa cells, I suppose. And I keep telling my students that indeed these cells have done an enormous beneficial work for the world. At the same time, the way that we have treated Henrietta Lacks or her family is not exactly, let's say, the standard that we want to copy. I mean, there is really something there. So I've always made it a point to make sure that we would, use data and specimen in an ethical way. And our position in 2008, we started having committees and work at that time. There's no pointer here, or is there a pointer? Yes, there is a pointer. Okay, so privacy and confidentiality, general rules apply. That was before the GDPR, of course. Consent, we wanted to use the word broad consent. Now, I realize that the word broad consent is absent from the DOT. True. However, I think by implication it's there. If you look at what Article 12 stipulates, where people have to be informed about, it cannot be the specific use of your material, because no one knows that yet. At the moment of collection, you probably also will want to know, broadly speaking, where it's going to be used for, and it's common, I think, to sort of indicate an area in which the material will be used. Let's say cardiovascular research, let's say cancer research, let's say some specification which is, of course, not completely specific, but will indicate an area in which the material or the data can be used. In accordance with what later became the DOT, we thought that storage could be indefinite. We didn't see the purpose or the value in destroying material if that had been collected. So we thought that storage could be indefinite. And very important also, and this is also reflected in the CIOMS guidelines 11 and 12 in the booklet that we wrote in 2016, that broad consent is mainly to be seen as consent for governance. So what you consent to is for your material, your data to be treated in a certain way, which has to be specified. And then, of course, the whole idea was you specify the governance under which the data and the material is handled. You do that at the moment of collection, and then years later, or maybe days later, doesn't matter, but later you will actually use it according to the things that you have agreed upon. A special situation, of course, is with children. Their material is also collected. Our hospital is the central hospital for pediatric oncology. Actually, it's the most specialized children's hospital in the whole of the Netherlands, which is a tiny country, I agree, but still. And so we collect a lot of information from these children, and then what do you do when they turn 16? In the Netherlands, it's 16. It could be 18 or 21 in some of your countries. That doesn't matter, of course. And do we have to reconsent, or can we settle with thick opt-out, meaning we inform them and ask them whether or not they want to withdraw, and if they do want to do that, then they have to send us something. We chose that option, so we used a thick opt-out. Thick meaning you do alert them to the fact that there's something to be chosen. But of course, this is just one way of doing this. We thought dynamic consent is not a real option because, in a way, dynamic consent works if you can go back and forth and you have constant, or at least the possibility to have contact with the donors. Let's call them donors. I don't know if that's the term that we want to use, but those people who give specimen or data, I could call them donors. Anyway, it's not realistic to have interaction all the time with them. Return of results. There is not a very clear stipulation in the DOT. We thought at that time that for donors, so patients, to not want to be informed about clinically valid or clinically relevant information would not be acceptable. That's a difficult sentence because I used not twice. But the point was we would not agree to patients having their data or material in the biobank if they would disagree with being informed about clinically relevant outcomes. So we would sort of say, well, then you're not in. And if you're in, then we will tell you if something relevant comes up. That was 2008. Ownership, we thought patients do not own the material, the hospital does, and commercial use would be acceptable if part of the broad consent that was obtained at first. That was 2008. Then we started to work, and yeah, we've done a lot. Maybe it's also good to say that Utrecht was among the first centers to actually have organoids and develop organoids. Hans Klevers is every year hoping that he will be the Nobel Prize winner. He still has to come. So we were very much involved in the whole development of organoids and what can you do with those. One thing that we came to realize is that to put everything on the shoulders of one research ethics committee, REC for me is a research ethics committee, is maybe too narrow a view. If we want to talk about governance, then let's talk about an ecosystem in which there is a research ethics committee, sure, there is a custodian, important. The whole institution actually has to agree to a certain extent. Researchers need to be trained and informed and educated. And then maybe also we want to have a patient and public involvement committee. So PPI is Patient and Public Involvement Committee. As Jan already indicated, there is a provision in the DOT that you should have something like that. But how that's then given, let's say, reality or put on the ground is something that still needs to be discussed. Anyway, for me, it became clear that we cannot put everything on. It's a very very nervous one. Let's talk about an ecosystem there. This was also very interesting. As you will know, probably you'll have experienced this as well. So we started with collecting data and specimen. Great. And then let's say years later, the researchers would come to us and say, well, I now have money to actually take the specimen out of the biobank, do whole genome sequencing with them, and then put the material back in the data bank, but not the data. So what happens here is very interesting because, of course, you know, in a way, the custodian of the biobank is often someone who actually really needs to give you access to where the freezers are stored. And the freezer has to be opened before you can actually have access. But data is much harder to control. There will be someone who is a custodian, but that is probably not, I mean, it's not as if that person is going to check your computer every day. So data are much more easily accessible. So we said, we do want to keep control, and we do want to know what you do with the studies. We said that, but if they do it, I don't know. Return of results is not always possible. I think we also donated material, organoids, to the ATCC collection, which of course is anonymous, so that will make return of results impossible. We did that because we wanted to advance science and to make sure that everyone could use organoids. Nowadays, everyone has organoids, so this is not special anymore. But in the early days, actually, we hoped that we could advance science in that way. Very interesting, our parts of our biobank were so commercially interesting because, as you probably know, a lot of pharmaceutical companies are very interested, especially in organoids, because they can use that for drug testing, and they develop all kinds of products based on these organoids. So part of our biobank was actually purchased by a commercial company. What do? Do we accept that? How do we inform patients or donors about that? There was quite a lot of money involved, I can tell you, over $100 million. So that was very interesting for the university, of course. What do? We said we want at least a thick opt-out. But of course, the reality is that a lot of this material was actually donated by cancer patients. From 2012 on, they do not live any longer. So we did do this, had very few people resigning or opting out from the biobank. But it was a big issue for us as a committee. Closing a collection, hardly any work done. Yes, DOT states that you would have to have a provision. It says you have to have some sort of regulation about that. But what do you do exactly? And there are two forms, right? There is material that is no longer used. We have a lot of urine samples that no one uses. After 10 years, we will say we throw them away. Why? Because it costs money to store all that, and it takes place. So at some point, you have to also throw material that is not used away. But to close a whole biobank is another matter. And then, of course, in what detail should that be part of your consent forms? So we are now in 2025, well, almost 26. Can we still use traceability or identifiability? Jan already gave the answer. And I think Jan is right. I think it's an obsolete concept, right? There was a point where people said, well, no. So whole genome sequencing in itself will not identify, because it will only be identifiable if you have somewhere a list of names attached to that outcome of the sequencing. But of course, as you all know, and rightly so, the whole movement in science is to become more transparent and to also have your data be reused and re-accessed, because those are the principles that we want scientists to work by in order to be able to actually check on their findings. So from that point of view, we want data to be published. So nowadays in genetics, I'm not a geneticist, but in genetics it's quite common to actually also publish your raw data, which means that more and more we will actually get to the point where it will be very easy to identify an individual given a outcome of whole genome sequencing. Yeah, indefinite use. I like the slide that Jan gave with let's say the rights of the patient, and then let's say the public health benefits on the lower side. I would put them next to each other and say what we are doing here is a balancing act. We're constantly making a balancing act, right? We do not want, because it's in no one's interest, to block science, of course. At the same time, there also needs to be sufficient attention for the rights of the patient/donor. So it's really also a matter of where do we put the balance. In my country nowadays, indefinite use is questioned. I'm still in favor, but that's my personal opinion. But indefinite use is no longer seen as the right balance. Indefinite use is possible according to the DOT, it's there. But should it be kept? It's a question. Broad consent. We had a very, I think it's quite common actually to identify cardiovascular cancer research, let's say areas of medical science for which the patient, the donor, permits further secondary use. But as you know, diseases sometimes change categories. When I studied, a gastric ulcer was not seen as a infectious disease. Nowadays it is, right? So diseases change categories. Then what do? Do you follow what the reasonable person would have thought then, or what the person would think now? We argued the latter. We said we have to follow what a reasonable person, the patient, would think now. So if nowadays gastric ulcer is seen as an infectious problem, then we assume that the patient would have given permission if infectious diseases are actually the area for which he or she donated the material. But that's also something to be discussed. And of course, in Europe, we have all kinds of regulations going on that are maybe just European, but at the same time, they have the tendency to be generalized, right? I mean, it's just Europe, but at the same time, companies will also want to be in conformity with the European rules, so they have this generalizable influence. We nowadays say that to not give any return of results could be acceptable. Indeed, very interesting, about the use of ethicists, sorry. There has been an extensive discussion about how return of results should be asked and whether tiers of informed consent, of broad consent or return of results could be used. For instance, saying if it's clinically relevant, if it's personally relevant, if it's without any specifications of relevance. There's a whole bunch of literature about that in ethics. No one uses it. I have not seen tiered consent in any form, in any concrete informed consent form. So I think it's not going anywhere. We hardly ever see any results that are brought to the attention of the committee before returning to patients at all. Ownership, I think there's also a bunch of literature about the biobank as a public trust, is not the reality. Sensitive issue, yes. One more thing, I did note that I have to stop. If we think about the balance and we move maybe a little bit further away from individual control, I mean, individual control is the word in the DOT. If we move a little bit further away from that, then maybe certain areas need to be specified where we do want to have individual control. Because if we move away from that as a general principle, we might want to identify areas, sensitive use, where individual control remains the standard. So that's why I brought up the point of sensitive use, that maybe that is a way to strike the balance in a new way. And of course, then we have to talk about which examples could be used there. This is going to be my last slide. If it shows, yeah. Yeah. One of the criteria, it's not clearly specified in the DOT, but one of the, actually I think you mentioned it. We want scientific rigor, right? Of course we do. We want scientific rigor. We ask that in the DOH. Should we also ask it in the DOT? It's not specifically mentioned. But you could argue that it's implicitly there because otherwise it will not help. It will not further public health, right? So implicitly you could argue that it's there, but it's not explicitly mentioned. Okay, so in Utrecht we use it. We use scientific rigor as a condition for using the material. Great. Then we have had a lot of examples of commercial companies who are very interested in our organoids, but not interested in giving all the details, because they will say, no, that's privacy, that's intellectual property. Sorry, we cannot reveal that. We will tell you what we will do, and it will be an indefinite list without any end. So what do we do? Do we think, well, then we don't give it to you, or should we actually hope that that is something that they will use to further public health or whatever? Biopiracy is, of course, also something that we should talk about. I think that's where the DOT could also be stronger. Service providers. I mean, of course, the material doesn't go to one place. It doesn't. It goes to several places. Because not one company can do everything. It will use service providers, maybe whole genome sequence companies who actually do services for the company you give it to. Should we also always be aware of which and where? We have a position on that, but I lack the time now to talk about that. Should we allow stockholders? As I told you, we've allowed it. You can criticize us for that. That's an interesting matter. And some form of patient and public involvement has to be, I think, specified. My next slide specifies that, but I think I'm running out of time, so I will stop here and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for excellent lecture, Professor Van Delden. Thank you. Now we will move to the next session.
Okay, thank you very much for Professor Hans Van Delden, very informative speech. Okay, finally, our third presentation will be delivered by Mrs. Feline van der Heydt, former intern of the World Medical Association. Her video presentation will be accompanied by Dr. Otmar Kloiber, Secretary General of the World Medical Association. Dr. Kloiber, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. So I'm not the presenter. I'm not giving you a presentation, a speech, but I have commissioned the next speech. And it is a little bit a novelty, which I would like to introduce, and therefore I'm here. We have a tradition that we have interns with the World Medical Association, which are staying for a couple of weeks with us at the office in Ferney-Voltaire. And it is also a tradition that we ask them to go through the policies which are up for revision in the following year after their internship. And this is usually a very freestyle exercise. We ask them to dissect the policies, to look into the language of the policies, to compare it to other policies, and to give us their opinion where and how a policy should be revised. This has been a very successful exercise in the past. We got a lot of very interesting insights from a younger generation on our policies and how policies should develop and how language of policies should be developed. Now, in view of the revision of the Declaration of Taipei, which is up for next year or was up for next year, this was also something natural on the agenda for students to look into, and the student which got this task was Feline van der Heydt. Now, the novelty with that is, number one, we asked her to use an AI tool to do this. So we asked a new tool that was on the market then, Notebook LM by Google, which allows you to build your private RAG, retrieval augmented generation system, that is limited to a number of input data that you give to the document, to the system, and then give the system a task to work with this material that you have inserted there. So it is basically a kind of a scoping review that we have asked her to do with a purpose to see which comparable documents to the Declaration of Helsinki have different or other elements of protection, of principles for protection for the donors which have given material or data to a database. So we ended up with about 50 documents that were included. The inclusion criteria I set was that those should be scientific documents or reputable book publications, soft law or legal documents, or technical instructions of health, of databases and biobanks. The exclusion criteria was that documents which are not focusing on databases and biobanks should not be included to that. And I also asked that the time frame would be focusing on newer documents. That means documents in the same time frame as the Declaration of Taipei, starting in the year 2000, and the majority of the documents is after 2015, so approximately the same age of the Declaration of Taipei. Now, Feline is not able to be with us here, so I have asked her to record her work, and this is the second novelty of that we have a student presentation in this series of revision of documents on the international scene. And may I ask the technicians to give us the presentation, the video presentation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Feline. I'm a medical student from Germany, and at the beginning of the year I did an internship at the WMA where I started working on this research project with Otmar Kloiber. And I'd love to be there with you in real time, but when you're listening to this, I'm going to be in my gastrology exam, so sadly I can't be there. The idea of the research was to compare the Declaration of Taipei to other publications to see whether there are points discussed that might be missing in the declaration. And because it was a little bit experimental, I'm going to talk a little bit longer about the methods. So first, I selected sources through PubMed and Google Scholar. And then the idea was to use Notebook LM. Notebook LM is an AI-powered research tool where you can put all your sources into a notebook and then ask the notebook questions about your material. Now, what works well? Why did we choose to use Notebook LM? When you put your sources into the notebook, and it's really good for comparative analysis, it can give you quickly extract information, complex information, without me having to read each source in full. And also because it's a large language model, it has the ability to extract information from context about a topic without the keyword specifically being in it. And because it works on your material that you put in it, the hallucination is very reduced compared to other chatbots. What didn't work so well? I also put a little picture that AI generated for me of me working with AI and it giving answers that I'm unhappy with or that are wrong. The biggest problem was that I wanted to know, or we wanted to know, which topics are discussed by how many sources, which topics are the most popular or the biggest concerns. And when you ask the chat box, list all, or which are the sources that talk about this topic, list all the sources that talk about this topic, it's not really good at counting because it works on partial retrieval. So it would give me an answer and show me the extracts to the topic with a little reference, and then you can see where did it take this extract from. And so I would have a number of sources, but then later with different prompts or going deeper into the research about the topic, I would find that other sources in my notebook also talk about the topic. So I noticed that the initial number is not correct. And this is because of this partial retrieval, that with every prompt it picks a chunk of the sources that it thinks is most relevant and then answers with that. So with a different prompt it might pick a different set of sources. And so the conclusion kind of is that I don't think the numbers are completely accurate, but I do think with varied prompts that I used and my manual revision of some of the extracts and revision, I do think it's a good indication of which topics are most relevant. So my outline, the two parts of the presentation are first the topics that are found in all the papers but are already in the Declaration of Taipei. I'm only going to talk a little bit in detail about a few topics that I found interesting where there were additional points in the sources that might be interesting to add into the declaration as well. And then the second part, topics that are not explicitly mentioned in the declaration, and I also picked out a few more that might be interesting for inclusion in the declaration. So first here, you can see an overview of the topics that are already in the declaration and are also popular in the sources. For example, you can see which ones are almost omnipresently mentioned, like informed consent, even though there's some discussion that the more traditional consent is ill-suited for the open-end big data biobanking that we're doing today. Privacy, confidentiality, transparency, security, they're all widely discussed among the sources. Security, for example, they also talk a lot about different technical measures that I'm not going to elaborate on. I'm going to talk about the 4 topics on the top here. First, commercialization. Commercial use is in the declaration under consent, but in the topics, in the sources, there were many concerns about commercial interests overriding public health goals and shaping research agendas, and therefore public trust decreasing. And that, of course, being in conflict with, or in contrast with the possibility of commercializing medical treatment that also is an incentive for research and that also which also benefits the public, of course. Then the protection of vulnerable groups. It is covered in the declaration, and it's also extensively covered in the Declaration of Helsinki. But the new big data context that is coming up raises concerns about newly generated vulnerabilities, so-called pathogenic vulnerabilities that are generated through the research itself. For example, policies that are derived from biased data sets. And then re-identification, which is a problem I'm also going to talk about later, being an even bigger problem for minorities. And then even though in the suggestions, even though there is a shift towards a more from the individual to a more wider societal implication, maybe for vulnerable groups, the prioritization has to stay important, the focus on the individual. And then when talking about community engagement, patient organizations might be necessary to have a more effective way of standing up for their rights. And then, of course, legal prohibition against discrimination, for example. And then intellectual properties in the declaration as well. I felt like there was one additional point when protecting intellectual property so much that it leads to exclusivity and monopolies potentially that end up in restricted address, leading to a conflict with collective interests because there's kind of this ethical duty for sharing to maximize the benefit for the public, which participants also gave their data for. And managing incidental findings in the DOT is also under consent only, and then under governance a little bit on procedures how to recontact patients. In the sources, it was very clear that it's a challenge to establish clear criteria when or if it's a must to return incidental findings. There are arguments against returning incidental findings at all because the high costs and high labor might be resources that are better allocated somewhere else for the public benefit. But most refer to the limited obligation for disclosure, meaning that committees would have to categorize the findings, and then depending on the category, a patient would either have to be contacted directly with a letter in a few days or never be contacted at all. There are CIOMS guidelines on this, so I don't want to be repetitive. Most important is criteria like clinical significance and actionability, or for example, for not returning them findings with a very high false positivity rate, and therefore leading to more psychological and social harm than benefit. And then we're already in the second part. These are topics that I picked out as most important or most interesting from the sources that are not specifically in the declaration. I'm not going to talk about the ones at the bottom because I felt like they were quite self-explanatory or already covered, like professional secrecy. I felt like was covered enough by governance and confidentiality, and I will talk enough about scientific validity when I talk about the other topics above. And then quality management is also kind of part of governance. The sources also talked about environmental monitoring. It discussed a lot about storage and ensuring the quality of material, which is important for ethical research because you don't want to put any participants at risk for no purpose in the end. And because all the topics in the box overlap with big data or have become more prominent because of big data, or a lot of the new issues arise because of the big data, I'm going to talk about big data first, just in case not everyone has heard about it. Where is it? So the definition of big data are the 4 V's, a very large volume, high velocity, high variety, and then issues of veracity, and also the integration of very powerful technical analytics like artificial intelligence to process data. And so the risks that come from this are that it's because of this large volume and high variety of sensitive data, it becomes a very attractive target for cyber attacks, and it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to truly anonymize data, because it becomes increasingly unlikely that a unique set of combination of values apply to more than one person. And then algorithmic bias and poor interpretation, just data sets that reflect inequalities, and then the derived knowledge intensifying these systemic inequalities. And lack of explicability in artificial intelligence and regulatory challenges, they just reduce transparency and reduce accountability, and the automated decision-making can lead to poor interpretation, misleading results, and of course that comes with many high risks. And there were certain suggestions about, very vague, but having additional safeguards needed, and then the ethics by design approach, meaning that you just include ethics into the design of big data projects from the very beginning, so that when new challenges arise, you can more quickly address them. Re-identification was a very common concern across the sources. Where? Yes, re-identification was a very common concern across the sources, especially now with the amount of data and the technical advancements. The anonymization failure I've already talked about, and that it's just more at risk because there's more linkage between previously unconnected data sets and also cross-referencing public data. And then, of course, some parts of genetic materials that might never be able to surely anonymize these parts of data. And of course, it is a breach of trust and privacy and comes with a high risk of discrimination and stigmatization. International collaboration and global injustice. I felt like maybe this belongs a little bit in the preamble, because the suggestion that global harmonization of ethical standards is important for trust is kind of, I guess, a goal of this declaration as a whole. But I found very interesting to think about some of the sources talked about the trust that is very different for participants, where if it's a research project in their country or a country that has similar ethical standards, or a multinational research project, they would always prefer these things over a research project that is, for example, in a single foreign country. So it plays a big part. And also to address these things with cultural sensitivity, meaning that you have to tailor the governance to not only recognize, but also to respect different cultural, societal, and religious views on material, on research, and also engage with local leaders for ethical guidance. Because it's not really the case yet that we have global harmonization, exploitations of low research settings is just a big risk, leading to forum shopping, because we have because of financial limits, we have limited regulatory oversight. So forum shopping is when data holders seek permit in countries that have more relaxed ethical standards. And again, the worry in the sources that commercial interests distort the priorities for medical research and just deepen unfair health gaps that we already have worldwide. Next are special categories of personal data that require additional safeguards, that their processing is at greater risk for misuse. Included are genetic data, data revealing social and ethnic origin, also data concerning sex life or sexual orientation, and then human embryos, fetuses, and also derived cells. Yes, and the suggestions are quite obvious. More technical safeguards are needed and independent oversight. But also, even though big data kind of has the more data, the better strategy, maybe in these cases, data minimization still is a principle that should be followed. And ethical decision-making, because of all these issues that I've discussed, the sources call for all relevant stakeholders to be involved in the decision-making and also include different considerations and competing ethical views, and not only the evidence that might be uncertain from the evidence from research that might be uncertain, include also all the other considerations into the decision-making, and calls for proactive, robust, very responsive and transparent governance that also takes accountability for the research outcomes. And then the risk of profiling, tracking and surveillance. The profiling is quite close to discrimination and stigmatization. And the sources call for an explicit prohibition of profiling. Tracking is described in the sources as a sophisticated method that an attacker uses to deduct sensitive info about an individual, meaning that they ask many, many clever questions and then kind of piece the answer together until they have the information about one individual. And there are some suggestions like tracker detection and statistical blurring of query results, meaning that the system would give slightly wrong answers every time so that it's harder to deduct information about one specific person. And then surveillance, intensive monitoring of participants, for example, that we look at movements, activities, or even emotions, but also when the state might use it, for example, for public health security, that there's kind of an ethical challenge to balance the needs, and that in general, when someone uses these measures of surveillance, they must be able to explain why it's necessary, and it also has to be proportionate. Next is data obtained from online environments, including personal devices or websites, and also social media. Risks are quite obvious, privacy risks, and then also commercial control depending on who owns the device and the data that is collected from it. And it calls for more specific consent models, and there's also a CIOMS guidance on online data, and again, data minimization might be important here. And last, I have the emergency plan or the disaster recovery plan in case of a human cost or natural disaster. That backups, regular backups are important, but also duplications that not only have to be distinct geographically, but also the utilities they rely on. So one can withstand a disaster that is affecting the other. And then an on-call list of people on standby, and an emergency protocol that is approved by an ethics committee. That's it from me. Thank you very much for having me. I have AI again, did the magic for me of a picture of AI and I celebrating being done with this research project. And if I can give one more piece of advice, even though it's very fun to work with artificial intelligence, always stay attentive.
Thank you, Dr. Heydt. Very outstanding. True, it's very outstanding. So now let's open the floor for discussion. How many minutes? How many times we have? 15 minutes. Okay, please identify yourself before you have the comment or question, please. Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Leah Wapner from the Israeli Medical Association. Thank you everyone for a very, very interesting presentation. I think it was very important as we're going into this to understand the background. I have two separate questions. One of my questions is that we've all noticed that DOT was not very widely known or accepted, and if you can a little bit give us a perspective, why do you think that happened? Do you think there was something lacking in the paper itself? Because as we've seen now, there were areas that weren't covered. or other organizations, just as CIOMS came in and had regulations? And if that is the case, then how do you propose we change this when we're going through this revision? So this is something which would be very interesting. And the other thing which I think was very interesting, if Jan, if you could answer that, we put in some provisions in the original DOT that basically you said just doesn't work, or both of you actually said they didn't work. It was very nice to discuss this ethical aspiration, but in real world, or would like to say real world evidence, it just didn't work. And if you can a little bit comment as we work going into our work, that we should be able to be careful not to do that again.
Please.
You want me to start? Okay. Why is the DOT not widely cited and widely used? Well, use and citation, of course, is not the same. Citation is maybe scientific literature, and use may also be by parties who do not publish about it, so I'm not entirely sure whether it's not used. Maybe some more specification would help. It's very open. I mean, guidelines 20 and 21 in the DOT just say you have to have something, whatever. And that may be a way of saying, well, you figure it out yourself, which is what people do, and then don't refer to it. That could be a source. As to your other question, yeah, the thing that I really talked about was there's this extensive literature about incidental findings. I don't think they were incidental at all. I mean, if you look for things, then you'll find things. So they're not incidental, which is why I don't use that term. I talk about return of results as a term. And then there's this extensive literature about how people should be able to discriminate between things they do want to hear and they don't want to hear. And I think that didn't work, at least those proposals which are not in the DOT did not work because they would require an extensive administration, because you would have to keep track of everyone's wishes and have to run through that, which of course would be entirely possible if we can search for data in extensive databases, then we can also do this. But it's something that the scientific world has found to be disproportionately laborious and therefore doesn't do. And committees have not pushed on it, and so it's not done. Yeah.
So thank you. I agree with Hans that it's not the same, that it's not referred so much, and it's not much used, because the process itself, when we were going through this 2 to 3 years, there were so many outside of the WMA participating in the discussions on various topics, and I'm quite sure that it has been used outside WMA more than it has been referred to. But I must say that I was a little bit surprised that it has not gained that attention that we wished for reference, but that is one of the issues I think we should look into now. We tried to make it more visible afterwards. For example, we wrote to JAMA and others, and it was not, there were not that interest of publishing what we had to say about the data. It wasn't that interest of the scientific community to discuss this. Regarding the first question, I think we were quite prudent when we were putting down the governance issues and the information to individuals, because when you look at it, it is actually practically very difficult to inform every individual of the information that is gathered into a health database and biobank. I will lastly just mention one issue which is a very important one, which is return of incidental finding. And incidental finding can be from a research project, but I will just mention one example from my own country. I mentioned this company Decode Genetics, and they have whole genome sequenced around 40% of the whole population. When you add to that the technicality of imputation, where you have information of the linkage, how individuals are related. You can be quite sure how an individual who is related to someone that has been whole genome sequenced, which is his genetic workup. So you can more or less know of most of these cases in the whole population. So the example is on the BRCA gene. The BRCA gene, one of those at least, they have a clear risk of cancer both in males and females, but primarily in females. So the proponent said, we can find every female in the country with the BRCA gene easily. We should inform them, because 70% of them will get cancer during their lifetime, and it can be it can be dealt with by surveillance, that they are, they can come on yearly or biannual basis for screening, for example, or they can decide on preemptive operation. So this created a lot of debate, and it ended by a process by which there was set up that you could go and ask for your gene to be analyzed, the BRCA gene. And it was widely informed in the society. So a lot of women did that, to look into the BRCA genes. But they had, of course, they had to put themselves forward in that case. So there was no return of these findings in any case. But this is one of the ways you can go about. And now our government has a task on personalized medicine, because it has been revealed that about, I think, 140 different risk genes are of diseases that are amendable in some way. And so that is a process now to look into how to use this knowledge in a whole population. So there is a wide variety of methods that we can use that were not possible when we did this DOT at the beginning.
Yes, please.
My name is Carla Childers. I head up Bioethics Policy and Partnerships for Johnson & Johnson. Excellent talks, truly some of the most thoughtful that I've heard on the subject. And I'm curious, as you envision tackling the question of scope for the revision and the really important points you made around, which I agree with, the concepts that privacy is obsolete and we're over-reliant on that, and the tension between biospecimens, creating data from those. Do you have any initial thoughts from what we've learned over the years on how we might think about what would be an appropriate scope to include in this declaration? And just curious to hear your thoughts on that, because I feel like coming into it, that's my biggest question that I have, how, because it was focused on identifiable data and specimens. So I'm just curious to hear some initial thoughts or advice you might have on as we think about the scope and the revision.
Number one is the identifiable. Everything is identifiable now. We have to assume that is very clear. But that does not mean that privacy is an outdated concept. So I would disagree with that statement. Okay, good. So we have a new situation here that we probably have a lot of regulation around, which is based on the idea that anonymization or de-identification could help in order to protect privacy as such. That obviously is outdated. And actually, a genetic data set now gives a more prescribed description of a person than a name does. And everybody who has been in a clinical context knows that very often we do not identify persons by their names, but by symptoms. And 2 or 3 are just enough to identify very clearly one person in an institution. So this is a fiction of some of our legal instruments which doesn't work, whether that is HIPAA or the European Health Database. it doesn't work. It is already outdated in the beginning with that. And we have to look for new tools on how we do this. The idea, which obviously is carried here with the Declaration of Taipei, is this two-step concept to have a consent which is bound to a promise of governance, and second, then a committee that looks into the individual request that is being answered there, is to be answered from the data or from the specimens. Whether that holds or not is something which we will discuss in this course of the revision of the Declaration of Taipei, and we'll find out whether that was realistic or not. And we have to go on. But I think we stay committed as an answer to the principle of privacy, that this is important for us as physicians, as a matter of protection for our patients, and we just have to find out how we can do this in the future. Maybe part of this is also answer to Leah's questions, which you have. What we all do is, when we come to a new software, to a new contract, we have 30 pages of small print, and we scroll down and say accept. And this is one of the basic problems here, that we do not have the right tools on consenting properly and being informed properly right now. So that is something that we may have to think about also, or maybe that is an idealistic idea, which I have, I don't know. But still something which we have to work on.
Can I follow up? Yeah. This is, I was tempted to say something about the last remark, which also brings us in DOH context. It's very impressive how much information there's actually about what you can do to improve informed consent, which no one ever does. It's a drama, really. I mean, we have a lot of information how that can be improved, and research ethics committees simply do not use it and continue to approve 30 pages documents with all that fine print. So that is not something that we need to change the DOT or the DOH for. We simply need to start taking that serious. One thing that comes to my mind in response to your question, I think we move beyond the consent or anonymized paradigm. That is clear. And then, talking from a European perspective, there is the third way, and the third way is safeguards and conditions. So I think we have to go big on governments and not just state there has to be governance, period, bye-bye, but actually specify that more. Because that's where we can derive trust from. So safeguards and conditions, and then hopefully, because that's vital, right? I mean, why is there research ethics? Because there were scandals. Let's do the next DOT before there are huge scandals. Well, actually, there were already some scandals, of course, but still, I mean, so let's be preventive here.
Okay, hello, good afternoon. My name is Maria Corazon de Ungria from the University of the Philippines. I am not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of philosophy, a molecular biologist, forensic geneticist, and I'm into research. I chair the newly accredited university's research ethics board. So I said all that background, coming from a different perspective. One is that in the question of why the Declaration of Taipei perhaps is not as recognized, because in all the genetics journals that we submit our papers to, it is not required to fulfill the Declaration of Taipei. We need to follow the Declaration of Helsinki, but we need not follow the Declaration of Taipei. Perhaps that's something that the WMA can influence scientific journals. What happens after the first project? What happens to the samples afterwards? And the second thing that I've noticed in the discussions even this morning is that a lot of the discussions revolve around perhaps populations that are well known, like Europeans, Americans, etc. However, the representation of Southeast Asian countries is critical in biobanks, particularly in all the AI technology. If it is not properly represented, then we have certain biases in how this happens. And then in particular, being a population geneticist and doing field work, the informed consent, the Philippines has 110 indigenous communities. I don't think we can push informed consent aside or governance aside, because those communities actually do not trust well, at least in the Philippines, do not trust scientists per se. So coming in there and say it's governance issue, they don't even trust government. And so it's very, coming from the Philippines, it's quite an issue for us to be able to do that. So we are working in the ethics research in research in terms of coming up with better informed consents. The challenge here is with the Declaration of Taipei, it actually focuses a lot on the clinical, because of course this is the World Medical Association, on the clinical aspects, but it applies also to other types of research, such as population genetics. And there are certain things that we are not completely on the same table, like the ownership of samples is always owned by the individual, cannot be an institutional ownership, at least that's how we see it, and the indigenous communities don't see it. So there's the discussion now is co-ownership with data, particularly whole genome sequencing data. They need to be informed in what happens to the whole genome sequence, as you said with the Henrietta Lacks issue. Also, we need to define samples and results. Samples, data, and results. So samples are the biological samples. Nobody can own your DNA unless it's the person. The data can be co-owned. The sequencing data can be co-owned. The results of the sequencing data will be owned by the institution that generated the results, the data from the institution that generated the sequences, and then the DNA where the samples come from. So there is co-ownership. And there's a lot of discussion when you were talking about return of results. We've actually gone back to the field. We could not publish data with indigenous communities unless we go back and tell them their own story. That's the only currency that we have in terms of building trust. I hope that these types of consideration may be included in discussions on the Declaration of Taipei, because it also affects researchers such as us. Thank you.
The chair allowed me to respond to you. So first of all, I happened to be in Korea just a week ago, and there we were hosted by WHO and WIPRO, the regional office for the West Pacific region, was calling out to the ethics community, we need more support, we need more capacity building, because the research ethics committees are in a dire need to have a stricter governance and stricter methods to be able to oversee research. Because, so I am with you. I heard the same story a week ago, that this is not to belittle you, but to say, yes, you're right, this needs to be done. And this is a very important area also for the whole world, I would say, because a lot of movements of populations is actually studied by what you are doing. Of course, I didn't say that we should do away with government or that we should rely on governments. I said governance, right? So, and I still think if we do away with the consent or paradigm, the consent or anonymized paradigm, it doesn't mean that we do away with consent. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that in connection to consent, we need strong governance structures. And that, I think, is also something that I hope your population, your people would agree on. As to the property, in my slide it said it's still not something that the international community has agreed on. I just gave you the Utrecht answer, which is a very particular answer for a particular university, where indeed the samples are owned by the university. That's their view. You can contest that, but that is what it is. And again, I think there may be good reasons for that, but in certain contexts, that may be the wrong way to go. So that would certainly be something to discuss and to, well, further study. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we have in medicine several processes which are called donation, blood donation, organ donation, data donation now here, and the specimens that are being donated. And you could argue that the donation includes a transfer of ownership there. That does not relieve the ethical problem and material problem of the use of that material and the conclusions and the gains that are being made with that, the profits that are being taken out, the benefits are being taken out. as for instance in the Declaration of Helsinki, we have a clear idea about benefit sharing, which I think is something that, at least on a communal basis or population basis, could also be discussed for the Declaration of Taipei. And we also have in mind the question of material transfer rights, which we have discussed in the Declaration of Taipei there.
Okay. One moment. We have 4 minutes for the coffee. And I've seen many people asking me what is going on, when we will have the coffee. So we'll have the last 2 people that will comment. First and second, the lady there.
Thank you, Chairman. And also thank you 3 speakers for the very marvelous presentation. So I have some thoughts and comments for the 3rd presentation. So maybe Otmar will respond to that. So it's interesting to see this human AI collaboration and helping to find what we can do for the DOT. But I think maybe in the preparation of using notebook LLM, some background information or some like the prompts should be prepared. So for example, we always say that the WMA document should be read as a whole, okay, not by piece or not by sentences. So we know that something is said as a whole, not fragmentically, okay? And then secondly, the WMA declaration, things like that, they are ethical principles. So they are kind of philosophical. So when you literally say something, it actually implies more things. So when I saw those analyses saying that DOT is missing this, lack of that, I don't think that's really the situation, okay? And also, if we compare HDOT, we know that they have their own role, okay? So DOH is more like the mother document. And because the changing of the research concepts and styles and changing young human subject, clinical trial into data and biomaterial research. That's why we have DOT. And then the scope is certainly very different. So if you compare the things, they should be considered together. So not really saying that this is missing here and not there. So I think all these things, if they be more properly put, okay, as part of the prompt, we will get a different result from AI. Okay.
Thank you very much. Now, please.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm Cheiko Kurihara coming from Japan, and I'm working in the Ethics Committee Vice Chair. And I'd like to comment on congratulate Otmar for appreciate your very much excellent work with the younger generation, collaborating with AI. And the result is fantastic. And it's very nice to catch the issue of the data research, and also you expanding of the concept of DOT to the younger generation. It's a very nice presentation. Thank you very much. And also, I'd like to make some comment to Hans about the dynamic consent. And I feel very much sympathy with a participant from Philippines, and co-creation. The change of the DOT is a change from the research subject to research participant, and we have to recognize about the co-creation with the research participation. And dynamic consent, I can understand the difficulty of dynamic consent to impede the research integrity sometimes. However, it is dynamic consent is one tool to collaborate with data participants. So, so you said about the only negative aspect. I understand very well, but I think that it will be better to discuss more about positive aspects of dynamic consent. Thank you very much. That is my comment.
Okay, but we are sorry. Time is so limited, so we have to close this
But you can
session.
discuss it with our professor during coffee time. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to our distinguished speakers and the audience. We have successfully reviewed the history. Now we are ready to face the future in the next session on AI. So please join me in giving a big hand to our speakers. Thank you again.
We will now begin the session 2 and focus on the topic of the AI and the declaration of Taipei applying AI to health database. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Leah Wagner and Min-Chin Lee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank everybody for staying in. I think that we had a very good start, and I think that the morning and our opening session has led us, I think, with many more questions, dilemmas, problems than we might have expected, but I think that this is always very good because hopefully this will give us a deeper insight and a richer discussion. I think that we've already seen that there are definitely areas in the DOT that we will need to look again at, maybe add on, maybe refine. And we also were able to see from the previous discussion that obviously not everybody has the same viewpoint. And not everybody is exactly on the same, I would say, timeline as things are happening. And this, since we are trying to do something globally, it's definitely going to be a challenge. Now, what I would invite everybody to take a pause from what we discussed till now and try to look at this next session as an opportunity for us to try to see how maybe someone from the industry, who I'm going to introduce, views the AI and how they view the databases and AI from their perspective. And I'm referring to my the first speaker, who is Sanjay Kashalkar. Sanjay Kashalkar is an architect with AWS. Whoever doesn't know that, that's Amazon Web Services. He helps, he's helping enterprises design and operate cloud workloads at a scale. He built a resilient data governance architecture used by organizations in automotives, finance, pharma, and government. He is based in Athens, Greece, and he's previously founded significantly companies in Munich, building data analytics software for leading automotives and pharmaceutical companies across Europe and Japan. So I think it is time that we also hear how the other side, who's actually working with the database, views the challenges and views what we're trying to do. So please, Sanjay, and thank you very much for coming at a short notice. Thank you very much.
Check. Check.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sanjay from Amazon Web Services. And it's such a privilege to be invited to speak here on this occasion. So thank you once again to the moderators and the WMA. So AWS. For those not very familiar, AWS is the on-demand cloud computing arm of Amazon. And we provide on-demand cloud services, which means compute, storage, and many other services that organizations can just access over the internet. And what this means for organizations is that they don't need to worry about buying and managing infrastructure. They can just simply access it on demand. They can scale up and down. Whenever they have more workloads, they can go up. When not, they can scale down. And also, it's a pay-as-you-go service. We've been doing this in healthcare for almost 15 years. And this experience shows. So KLAS has named us as the #1 cloud provider for healthcare. And this ranking matters because the ranking comes from healthcare providers themselves. AWS also has the most purpose-built services for healthcare and life sciences of any cloud provider. And all of this is built on a foundation of security. So as we see here, we have more than 166 HIPAA-eligible services and thousands of global compliance certifications. And this is why the organizations that you know place their trust in AWS. And what you see is a picture of innovation in healthcare on a global scale. And that brings us to the question, how do you govern such innovation? So the Declaration of Taipei establishes principles for consent, privacy, and data governance. The challenge is, how do you put these principles to work at scale? At scale with thousands of petabytes, hundreds and thousands of users. And we think that strong data governance can be an answer. And I would like to show you one such practical example, what we call the Trusted Research Environment. It's a mouthful, so I'll just say TRE. And this TRE has been proven in the past few years to help organizations implement data governance at scale. So what is TRE? Once again, it helps you to implement your principles into practice. Most TREs are based on the 5 SAFEs framework, which some of you may be aware of. So safe people, safe projects, safe data, safe setting, and safe outputs. And let's see, what does this actually enable in practice? There's a really good example from Genomics England. They have one of the world's largest genomics databases, with the data is expected to grow to over 300 petabytes in 5 years. And they've reduced the time it takes for common tasks by almost 99% for researchers. And there's a very nice quote from the CIO who said that they're able to democratize access to the data. And what this means is that researchers just need a very small budget to spin up an environment, and they're able to connect to all of this data to conduct research. And this TRE is built on AWS. UK Biobank, another really good example. Over 30 petabytes, 500,000 participants. Again, they're building on AWS. A very quick look under the hood. I apologize for the diagram. Don't worry if you can't read it. But essentially, I just want to show you what it looks like. You have this central box is the TRE. You have data that comes in through an airlock where you have compliance checks, whether it's trusted or untrusted data sources. And after the compliance checks are passed, then it's a part of the environment. And you have researchers who can then join this organization. They spin up their own virtual environment. They have their own projects. And only the people who have the authority to access a data set can access the data set. So project A can only access data set A. All of this is governed by a team. So you have data managers, you have information governance, you have the TRE operators. And what's continuously running is the identity management. You have workflow controls, and also the audit trails. So this is running all the time. So the point is not really just the technology. The point here is that an environment like this, a TRE, helps you to enforce governance principles in practice. Yes, let's talk about privacy and security. Again, the Declaration of Taipei has principles related to confidentiality and privacy, but how do you apply these principles at scale? So cloud infrastructure like AWS enables you to do this with technical controls. And what does this mean? So the first thing that many people ask us is that, if we are putting things in the cloud, then who's actually responsible for the privacy and the security? And that's why when it comes to cloud security, we have a very clear division of responsibility where AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. So that means everything related to compute, storage, the databases, then the infrastructure that's kind of tying it all together. So basically, all the plumbing that's happening in the cloud, we're responsible for the security. And the customer is responsible for security in the cloud. So that means it's your files, it's your data, it's your encryption keys, it's your governance policies. Yeah. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. Now, this is just an example. It's not all the articles from the DOT, but just to give you an example on how you can go from a principle through best practices to technical controls. So if you look at this, this is DOT Article 10, for example, confidentiality. I'm just reducing it down to one word. Best practices here are encryption at rest, encryption in transit. Now, just two examples. There are more, obviously. And how you enforce it is with our key management service or your own customer managed keys. So this is how we think you can go from principles to practice. And that brings me to this side. So generative AI just holds so much promise. I think for me personally, it's amazing to be living in a time where we have so much hope on this technology. And it brings us a lot of hope for healthcare innovation, and it also brings challenges. And at AWS, we are looking at it from a people-centric view, where we put education, science, and our customers first. And so we say that when we talk about responsible AI, these are the core domains. And there will be more coming soon. But these are the core domains, and we are working on, let's say, the technology side of things to make these actually accountable. So it's not just theory. We want to have KPIs that can help our customers measure this. So for example, for fairness, this is basically bias. Is the model biased? Do you have any bias in your outputs? And we have, for example, SageMaker Clarify that actually helps you measure how much bias is in the output. Transparency, for example, enabling stakeholders to make informed choices about using an AI system. And if you, for example, go to AWS, go to Bedrock, that's where you can work with foundation models, you see that every model has an AI card, has a service card, and on the service card, you'll see a documentation which explains all of these different facets for each model. How have the engineers, what are the engineers saying about this particular model? What is its bias? How much can you rely on the robustness? What can you do about the explainability of that model? So the AI service card is a good start, which helps customers have an idea of the transparency. And we think that this is let's say, the right way to complement where AI is going. So, and to conclude, I would say that we're at an inflection point where the AI innovation is happening so fast, and that accompanied with responsible AI frameworks like this and the revision to the Declaration of Taipei means that it's a really exciting time for healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. If you can join us, I think we're going to leave the discussion open after all the presentations.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, and Professor Dr. Li Jianzhang. He is now the Director of the Department of Information Management at the Ministry of Health and Welfare, Taiwan. Dr. Li owns MD and Doctor of Science in Epidemiology from National Taiwan University and Harvard Public Health School. And Dr. Li, he is now one of the Taiwan key policymaker driving the national smart healthcare transformation, overseeing the initiatives in AI governance and all the national program. And today, Dr. Li would like to share a very, very remarkable topic is national AI centers and also the AI governance in Taiwan. Welcome, Dr. Li, please.
First of all, welcome to Taiwan, and feel honored to be invited to share this topic with you here. So today I'm going to share with you some of the practice of the AI under ethical framework in Taiwan. So well, some power. I don't know what happens. Yeah, so the first line I'm going to talk is about the 7 ethical risks if we do not use a framework to manage AI that will generate 7 ethical issues. The first is loss of autonomy. Second one is lack of accountability. Third one is opacity. Fourth one is patient safety risk. And the fifth is privacy concern, and sixth, inequity, and last is unsustainability. So we reviewed all of the guidelines and literatures. There's from the NIST, from the ONC HTI 1 4 core principles, and WHO 6 AI ethics. And to summarize all these ethical principles in Taiwan, we have a AI Basic Act, which is now in draft, but will be next year, probably will be go into practice next year. So in our AI Act, the first rule is that for any kind of AI use in the real world must follow the 7 ethical principles: the autonomy, responsibility, privacy, safety, transparency, sustainability, and fairness. But the issue is how to turn this concept into real practice. So this is the Ministry of Health of our IT department job. So we published a guideline and sponsored 10 centers across Taiwan. And we have 3 major approaches. We require that these 10 centers do these 3 approaches that they can fulfill most of the 7 ethical principles. The first one is for every hospital, if you want to introduce or use AI in your hospital, you need to have independent committees and also independent regulations to ensure the privacy and protection and cybersecurity compliance. So that also comply with the DOT rules when you're using data not only for the development of AI, but also when there's lots of AI used for AI inferences. And the second approach is that we want every AI, when you use in clinical practice, it should disclose 9 principles to the doctors. This idea actually generates from our drug prescription or lab test. For every lab test, every drugs, they have an instruction sheet for the doctors. So we think that for AI use in the clinical field, you also need an instruction sheet. The instruction sheet will describe what kind of data you use to train, what kind of data you use to validate, what are the metrics, what are the indication, contraindication, out-of-scope use, and maintenance. So everything should be disclosed to the end users for any clinical AI use in the real world. And we also require that for each AI use in the clinical field should have some certain kind of explainability analysis. For example, for the image AI, you should show the heat map, so the area by which that the AI make the decisions. So that the second things that we require the responsible AI center to follow. And the last thing is that we know that AI is very sensitive to the data itself. So although you get the TFDA approval, that does not mean that AI will work very well in another healthcare settings. So for any healthcare institution you want to use AI, you need to have the capability to do the local testing. And the local testing have to do periodically, not only once. We know that the accuracy or the effectiveness of the AI declines with time. Because AI is trained on historical data and our medical environment and data change with time. So they need to check the accuracy of AI periodically. We call it the life cycle management. So if every responsible AI center practice these three principles, that means most of the ethical principles will be followed. So we have 10 hospitals in Taiwan. They either use AI to detect the scaphoid fracture, brain metastasis, to make sure that the endotracheal intubation is on the right place, to detect the STEMI before they arrive at the hospital, and use the AI to detect early lung cancer, or use AI to detect hypotension during hemodialysis, pneumoperitoneum, or prevent fall, or detect pneumoperitoneum or osteoporosis. So all these 10 hospitals use the responsible AI center we described in previous slide to practice these on the real clinical setting. And that's the first type of AI center we call responsible AI use centers. But the responsible AI use center does not solve the fairness or the equity problems, because most of the AI are developed from single university hospitals. So the data used to train that AI does not represent the whole populations. So when they want to get TFDA approvals, the TFDA usually asks them to get multi-center data, population representative data. However, it is very difficult for any hospitals or any companies to get a population-based data, because you need very large population-based data to validate your AI, and most of the credit goes to the inventors. So nobody wants to help you to validate your AI. So that's why we set up the second type of centers. So the government sponsors 4 centers across Taiwan. These 4 centers form hospital alliance of different tier of hospital, not only the medical center, but also community hospitals, and also if some even have local clinics to join them, and so that when you have an AI you want to get TFDA approval, you can follow this streamlined process. The first step is you go to the TFDA and get a consultation. They will advise what kind of data, what are the size of the validation data you need to make sure it is representative of Taiwanese populations. And the second step, you take the TFDA advice to our 4 government-sponsored AI validation centers. Then they will help you to collect that data, and also will give you some quotation, because there needs lots of administrative work. And the third thing is that you do the validation. Most of the time, when you do the validations, the performance is usually suboptimal. So we also require that the center provide about 10 to 15% the identified data to enhance that models, to make sure that model can perform very well in the Taiwanese populations. So after the successful validations, they can use that data to apply the TFDA approval and also publish the results in the peer-reviewed journals. So that our streamlined process for AI approvals in Taiwan. So not only the TFDA serve as a gatekeeper, but we also build the infrastructure to help the companies, to help the universities to do the population-based validation, so that we make sure that the AI fairness, that every level of the population's data can be included, can be verified for that model. And the last thing, so this is the structures. So first, they will, the 4 centers will need to form hospital alliance, and this hospital alliance should cross systems because they are major hospital system in Taiwan. We need them to work together, and they also have to cross different levels, community hospitals, private clinic, also medical centers. And the validation can use either approach. Either you can use the federated learning or use the data pooling strategies. These are, both strategies are acceptable, and they build the infrastructures in this 4 center. So currently, for example, there's 4 center already have a lot of projects ongoing. And for example, I will give you one example. There's a company called Quanta Computers in Taiwan. They want to use the EKG to predict the 90 days mortalities. And then they need a population-based EKG. And this center helped them collect about 500,000 of EKG to validate that AI. So it is not a sample size that a single company can obtain. But with the help of this kind of centers, they can get very large population-based data to validate AI, to make sure that AI works for the Taiwanese population. And the last thing we need to solve is the sustainability issues. There's already 200 AI registered in Taiwan's FDA. So the national health insurance cannot reimburse them all. So when you want to apply the reimbursement, you need to prove your utility, not only the accuracy. And most of it, 80% of the AI is used for diagnosis. If you only do the diagnosis, not accompanied with early interventions, the patient outcome won't change. So our reimbursement criteria want to AI that make real change of a patient outcomes. So they need to do the clinical trials. So we sponsor 5 centers in Taiwan that they can help design the clinical trials. For example, if you have an AI that can detect osteoporosis using a single chest X-ray, then we will design a clinical trial, early detection osteoporosis with early interventions such as exercise, nutrition, or even pharmacological interventions. So MADE is a bundled programs, and the experimental group is the AI detection with early intervention. And the control group is the compare traditional groups and do the RCT cluster randomized. Then if after 1 or 2 years, if the result is good, they can submit that result to the NHI, National Health Insurance, and will make a final decision whether they will reimburse that AI or not. So the process is like this. If you have an AI product that already approved by the TFDA, the first step is go to the NHI consultation team. So they will let you know what kind of a clinical benefit they expect. So you bring their advice to our one of the 5 AI clinical impact research centers. Then they will discuss with you and help you design the clinical trial. And they will also execute the clinical trial for you. And after the clinical trial, the results will go to the NHI for the HTA evaluation, health technology assessment, do the health economic analysis, and do the final decision whether they want to reimburse or not. Without this kind of process, we can make sure that the use of AI can be sustainable because they really change the outcome of the patient, not only used as an aid of the physician diagnosis, but do not prove their outcome on the patients. So, yeah, so these are the, so this is last slide. So this is my last slide to share. So we have 3 types of AI centers across Taiwan. The first one is called Center for Responsible AI Use that apply to all levels of hospitals because not all levels need to develop AI, but when they want to use AI, you need to have follow that principles. Last year, we sponsored 10 hospitals. Next year, we will give the certificate. And also, we require every AI used in the hospital should be registered in the Ministry of Health and share the best practice to the peer hospitals. So that's the first type of AI responsible use AI center. The second one is used to help the developer so they can get the population-based data for you to validate that makes sure that every level of patients be included for your AI training and validation. And the last type is AI for impact evaluation that used for the reimbursement, health technology assessment. We propose that every AI should go to clinical trial before they can be reimbursed. So this is all I want to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Li. You may be interested because Professor Li, before he entering the government service, he is a professor of emergency medicine, and he has created so many AI assisted project-based service in National Taiwan University Hospital, and a very, very famous AI expert. Okay, let's move into the next speak. Our next speak is also outstanding. Is Mr. Hsiang-Kuo. Hsiang owns a degree of the computer science and the information management engineering from the National Taiwan University. He was ever principal development manager at Microsoft. Also is a very senior program lead at the US NIH. Hsiang is also the founder of the Taiwan AI Labs, and today he's going to deliver a talk on the trustworthy and responsible AI for healthcare. Let's welcome Mr. Tu. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to be here. Thanks for having me here. My name is Hsiang-Kuo. I'm the founder of Taiwan AI Lab. So Taiwan AI Lab is the very first open AI research institute in Asia. We established in 2017. We have about 200 top computer science and machine learning engineers. We focus on the trustworthy and responsible AI research. We are a non-profit, non-government organization. We are managed under a foundation. That's very unique because a lot of AI institutes, they are under the profit company, but we are non-profit. Okay, so the very first thing we work in year 2017, we provide what we call the federated technology to build the responsible AI. So when we say federated technology, actually that was the reason when we work with a hospital. Hospital by hospital, we want to do AI. Should we put data together or we put any data to where? That's a lot of questions. So because we are computer science engineers, so okay, how about we work around the issue? Therefore, we provide what we call the federated technology. In Taiwan, the hospital by hospital, we have a common data model, common protocol. Different hospitals arrange the same type of data. all together. We don't need to share data, and but each also have a PI. Then with the federated platform in place in the hospital, we can do the machine learning together. So from the policy side, you hear Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee also mentioned about federated learning. So Dr. Lee is also a pioneer in this federated learning architecture. He was one of the PI. So we work together. So Lovely become very successful. And I would say it will be the very first nationwide federated project around the world from what I can see. So in this way, in Taiwan Lab, we actually promote federated learning, trying to arrange the personal data, try to arrange the hospital data, and try to arrange the biobank and the national health insurance data together. Of course, there are a lot of difficulty in each individuals. However, we successful in couple projects. So all these picture you can see, we can unify in one protocol, one data model by different medical image, different medical his data, past data. We can do the machine learning in this way. Okay, so in Taiwan, we funded, that is actually promoted by President, former President, Vice President, but our current President, Lai. So this is a Taiwan Federated Learning Alliance. So starting from the hospital together, supported by National Development Council and National Science and Technology Council, we use this federated architecture to manage the sensitive data that should not leak to the public cloud or should not leak outside the institute. So not only we do DID, we do anonymous, but before we do the AI training, if we want to avoid the secondary use of the data, we have this federated architecture. Okay, so what is our role of Taiwan AI Lab in this architecture? First of all, if a hospital, they want to do the AI training. Instead of asking the hospital to give us data, we actually deliver a box. That is a federated platform. Now this platform is open source. With the machine, we deliver to the hospital. Then the hospital can do the basic machine learning and basic data governance inside the hospital. So we call it one box AI. So the hospital, they don't need to hire expensive machine learning engineer. They just need to consult with us. Then we deliver the technology into a hospital. We don't need to touch their data because you already see Dr. Lee, all the doctors in the hospital, they are super smart. They can manage the tool and do the machine learning by themselves. Okay, so if one hospital success in one model, and they want to collaborate with the other hospital, what can they do? Like Dr. Lee already mentioned, we have a hospital alliance. So one example is in Taiwan, we have Smart Healthcare Alliance. So different hospital with the same disease, they have one alliance, then they can organize the data in the same format. If one hospital already success in their AI model, they can cross hospital to train the AI model together without sharing data. And after we have this this model success in different hospitals by machine learning and the validation, can we get TFDA approval like Dr. Lee already showed? That's a TFDA cycle. After consultation, different hospital can do the validation together and file TFDA approval. And file TFDA approval in Taiwan, we also have Taiwan Clinical Trial Consortium that was sponsored by the Ministry of Healthcare in Taiwan. And so for different program, if you want to get the TFDA approval for your AI model, it's just like a drug approval process. Taiwan AI support the infrastructure to help the doctor to do the validation, and different doctor collect different data, and we have multi-center validation. Then we can file the TFDA approval based on the validation result. So that we support in the hospital and the machine, it just looks like this. this is one type of machine supported by HP in Taiwan. And this is what we achieved in Taiwan. We actually follow the OECD standards. We actually comply with HIPPA, and we also comply with GDPR, of course, because that's inside your institute. We don't share to any others, so that comply with GDPR. The Digital Service Act, Digital Market Act, and AI Act. So we are invited in the European Union to work with the hospital in European Union as well. Okay, I won't go to the detail, but this is like the screenshot. If you in the hospital, you can arrange your data. You can input your raw data, then follow the common data model. So with the same common data model, for example, if you have a brain MRI common data model, you select it, then you import this data. The common data model is designed and defined by the head of the alliance. Then other members join this alliance. The data will be verified by this common data model. So it set up the standards, set up the like you said, already said, the inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. We can also using this data set filter check to make sure all the data complies with the data collection. Okay, after we do the data collection, of course, we can do some like a statistics. Make sure all the centers, they have a even distributed data. If there's a abnormal data, can we curate it? So this subgroup analysis and the data distribution analysis usually follow after our data collection. Then we can do the federated learning, do the machine learning, and we can also do the validation on these machine blocks. And federated learning, we can also find our information dashboard. We can see how this model is being improved over the time. Then in the end, we can publish the model inside the, we call it federated store. So if we are under one alliance, the same alliance can publish their AI model into one store, so the member, they can share the same model together. Okay, so here comes 2023. In the year 2023, people start talking about, okay, I want not only medical imaging model or the data models, I want the GPT models. Can you help us? So in Taiwan area, we also build, we call it federated GPT model. So on top of this federated foundation, we also make sure all those like guardians, asset control, all the layers that comply with the financial banks and medical centers requirement. Okay, okay. During COVID-19, we also have a couple projects that is related to this federated alliance. For example, different hospital we arrange the medical imaging data, that's a chest X-ray data. So then we train the chest X-ray classifier across different hospitals without sharing data. So that's a chest X-ray classifier. And we also have a drug screening and also social distancing app, and also the various sequencing relation application built up on top of this federated alliance. So this is one example. The Brain Tumor Alliance deployed in different hospitals. The Brain Tumor Alliance is actually the very first example Dr. Lee showed in the Taipei Veteran General Hospital. So the Brain Tumor Alliance, for example, there's one important concept. If the model do well in the original trained hospital, it does not necessarily do well in other hospitals. So with the federated validation, we know that the model trained in Taipei Veteran General Hospital and the Far East Medical Hospital, for sure they work well in their hospital, but didn't work well in other hospitals. So this is very important. We need to do cross-site validation. After cross-site validation, then we can do the federated learning. After the federated learning, so they improve the performance together. So this is the basic concept. In the future, there will be a lot of AI application in the hospital being used. But before you use this AI application in your hospital, make sure you validate before you use it. And if the model performance does not do well, don't worry, let's do the learning together. So this kind of architecture we have been promoting European Union Parliament, also discussed with the GDPR legislative head in European Union, and also some important policymakers around the world. And we also have a couple of projects, for example, the STAR-TP project work under WHO, and also we work together with US CDC and providing the emerging disease decentralized federated learning, federated analytics platform for the US CDC. Okay, and this solution is also being shared in United States. Although I work for Microsoft, I was a big tech company in United States member. But I would say this federated approach can, so the big crowd will always stay there. Big crowd is good for like a public information, but for the sensitive information, there always something we don't want to share. That's fine, so let's go federated. So this approach also complies with the AI Bill of Rights that actually be promoted by former President Joe Biden. So their chief AI officer was in my office at that time. And we also collaborate with the Miami Cancer Institute, NYU Langone Health Institute. We will be invited by France, so that's France AI Asian Summit. Yeah, so if you remember in AI Asian Summit in Paris, J.D. Vance ever said, okay, you want to advance in AI, then you need to work with United States, which means lower your regulation. Yeah, raw regulation put into a big cloud, that's one approach. But the better way is not only work on the big cloud like AWS, Microsoft, but also we put effort together to promote the federated solution. So the OECD in European Union and also the AI Asian Summit, we are invited and we agree with these AI Asian Summits. I know I heard some people are from Denmark. So I ever been to like Sweden because of the Legislator, medical device there also, we also work together and okay, and this federated approach. Projects there's some duplication. We talk about the large language model, and the large language model have bias as well. So in Taiwan AI Lab, there's one thing you need to be very careful for any model you use. Need to validate, including the language model. So language model, we have some very interesting study. For example, if you check DeepSeek and ChatGPT, you randomly ask 1,000 questions. ChatGPT will say nothing wrong about United States. But if you look into DeepSeek, there's a little English, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese. So it will promote the anti-US bias in the certain language model. And also in Taiwan, we need to be very careful. It's specific in the government environment or the financial bank or the medical centers. We need to reduce the propaganda. So in Taiwan, we also measure the propaganda to reduce the possibility the AI model will respond something inappropriate during the process. And with this model, we also make sure this TNNLU is Taiwan's basic machine large language models capability. We also fine-tune, make sure it follow Taiwan's general knowledge, and also we want to, so if you look into the model, we want to make sure it can be used inside the hospital, inside the bank, but at the same time, it have a capable performance with some other models. So we also carefully measure the performance of the large language model that can be used inside the hospital with the expertise, but don't downgrade the performance too much. Yeah. Okay, so here is my last video. So this National Taiwan University Hospital, you can see over there. And this is our solution for
台湾医疗的最前线，在面对日益沉重的医疗量能压力时，台大医院选择了一条创新的道路。
医疗 AI 它是可以赋能病人跟赋能医师这是两方面。特别是你像科的医师来讲，甚至利用一些大型人工智或生成式 AI， 将来你的报告也更快所以 AI 会变成我们医师最好的最聪明的助理。
运用 AI 大幅减轻医师负担，提升报告撰写效率，这一切是怎么办到的呢？
我们在做可信任、负责任的 AI， 我们做了 agentic 的 AI， 我们有了联邦。
So we have a lot of different small AI models we put together inside this system, work together with GPT. Then GPT can help to diagnose to contouring the brain tumor and write the report. And he will feedback to his test system as well.
很感谢台大给我们这个机会。
每天，台大医院有数百位病患接受 CT。
Okay, I will skip the details. Okay, so in Taiwan we work with 92% of the medical centers, and we also work with 39 financial banks, and we also work with a lot of public and private sectors. So if you want to have an AI solution, you want to follow like our government's policy, and to build your solution, if you need the IT support, the AI support, welcome to Taiwan and talk to Taiwan AI Lab. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Great presentation. Thank you, Ethan. And you know, we have a lot of time for discussion. So I would like to ask my partner, Lee, could you lead the open discussion? And
Thank you very much. I think it was a very nice mix. Thank you for your presentations. They were very, very good. We were able to see from different aspects how we are trying to make the AI tools a little bit more, I would say, responsible. That would, I think, would be the overarching word that would be used by everybody. And I would please like to open the floor and invite everybody to ask questions. Just please, for their sakes and for everybody else, introduce yourself.
Hi, Jack Resnick, WMA Chair of Council. Thank you for all the great talks. Super informative session. Sanjay, I'd love to ask you a question. I hate to put you on the spot, but I think multiple of us are thinking about this, so I'm going to ask you a maybe challenging question. So one of the ways that our WMA ethical documents end up having influence at the end of the day, whether it's Declaration of Helsinki or Declaration of Taipei, is by getting embedded in legislation and regulation. And so AWS clearly a leader in cloud security. I think many of us in this room have health systems that use AWS. We trust it as a secure platform. But you know, there are all kinds of things happening across corporations engaged in AI, some of which fit the framework that you presented and some of which don't. In the US, at least, Amazon is a very, very vocal opponent of regulation of AI. Like they are supporting with the Trump administration bills to make it so that we can't regulate AI at all for 10 years. And I guess a lot of us are really worried about how we're going to move this forward if there's just a total Wild West with no regulation at all. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what Amazon is thinking and so aggressively fighting, you know, the 10-year ban that they want on any state regulation, et cetera? Sorry, but I wanted to give you a chance to kind of address it.
Thank you for the question. So right at the outset, firstly, I don't know about the specific case and I can't really comment on it directly, but I'll be happy to put you in touch with somebody who can for sure. From the infrastructure side, from the tech infrastructure side, I can tell you that we're doing our best to make AI as approachable as possible, as responsible as possible. I can give you 2 examples of this. So just this week, we've launched in Bedrock Guardrails, a feature where you're able to prevent hallucination to a large extent. Now, is it elimination? Not yet. But we're doing our best, from the technical point of view. From the legal side of things, I'll have to take that question and get you in touch with somebody. Yeah.
Let me just, a quick response. I think the question here, not that I'm answering is Amazon, I think the question that we have to say is whether the big companies, I would say 5, 6 companies that probably are dominating this field and the area and maybe the world, would they be looking for what they would call their own self-regulation? And that, I guess, is what Amazon and other companies are going to try to say. We're going to do our best and trust us. And then the other idea is, okay, but do we want to have outside external governmental supervision? And I think that is just something we have to discuss tomorrow in the work group. That's what I wanted to say. When we discuss who are we addressing, would we as WMA call out for government supervision of something, or governance? And just to put something in context, I think the EU is having this discussion at the moment. So I think this is a very important thing for tomorrow that we could discuss.
Thank you very much. Also, my compliments to the speakers. Very excellent presentations and very informative. And compliments to our Taiwanese colleagues for really a very advanced approach to use AI. I think that is pretty much singular in a country that you have gone so far and have in your national health system such an integrated AI strategy. Not only a strategy, but also mechanisms on how to realize it. Some of your talk reminded me of some of the sayings of some very famous chefs and their ideas about cooking. Said the ingredients have to be fresh and they have to be local. And I think that was something what you also were saying for the use of AI. Now, let me ask you the question on how you would see this as a regulator in your country and in charge of your healthcare system. In many countries, we have use of AI, for instance, in radiology or in pathology, wherever is pattern recognition now, AI is being applied for. But most of my colleagues don't know where the data is coming from, which population has been collected in, who has supervised the collection in that. What I heard from you, you would say, wait a minute, that simply doesn't work that way. You have to be more autonomous with it. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, so we believe that when you use AI, just like you use a drug or your lab test, there should be the instruction sheet mentioned that there's 9 principles. 9 principles actually from the HTI-1 rule. HTI-1 rule is 21st Century Cure Act. But I know currently it is not practiced in the United States, but we found it very useful here in Taiwan. So we want every AI to disclose the data set used to train, the data used to validate, what is the indication, what is the contraindication, what is the out-of-scope use, what are the maintenance, what are the metrics. So everything should be disclosed, and with the every screen that the doctor use AI should be pop out to let them know. So this is what we practice in our Responsible AI Center.
Hi, my name is Dr. Inti Liu from National Zhengzhi University International College of Innovation. So I'm a legal scholar and a lawyer with the public health training. So in terms of the, because topic here for this session is applying AI to health database and the bio banks. And we have we have 1 medical doctor and 2 or maybe 3 computer science engineers on the stage. So I guess as an engineer and a doctor, you believe in the science and the technology. So you tend to solve the problem relying on the science and the technology. But I would like to push you a little bit harder about if we want to apply AI to health database and the biobank, what kind of the law you think is necessary to imply this one, to handle its obstacle for extend the application of the AI and health database for more use. So the reason I ask this question is about like data governance is one of the issues. So whether we should pass a law to like a independent oversight body to supervise the secondary use of data, something like that, to gain the people's trust about collecting data for secondary use and other, because data is new oil for AI as well. So just one question, if we want to apply AI to more application, what kind of law you think is necessary? Is the master things we should have to the future application? Yeah, for both of the.
In Taiwan, we already have lots of regulation in this field. The first one is called the AI Basic Act. So AI Basic Act actually mandate that for any kind of use of AI in the real world setting, not only for the healthcare settings, you have to follow some ethical principles, and you need to do no harm. You need to respect the autonomy of human decisions. So that's already there, and will be make it formal. I believe in the next year. Our legislators is here. And the second related act is a regulation that regulate the use of the largest health database here in Taiwan, that the National Health Insurance Database. Yeah, so now, just last week, yeah, we passed that law. That law agreed that we can use the data for secondary use, but we allow a grace period that people can select to opt out. Yeah, so that's the two aspects of most relevant law here in Taiwan that we can use to regulate AI.
I'm Jacqueline Kitulu. I'm the president of the World Medical Association, and thank you for your fantastic talks. Actually captured some of them. One of my sons is a computer engineer, and I shared some of the slides. It's amazing, amazing. They refuse to be in the health profession. But really my question, not really a question, it's a comment to you, Ethan, in regards to, just looking at your presentation and looking at your team of very young people, working in this area, and looking at how, some of the other slides, integrating your work into clinical workflow. Part of what we're talking about today was about collaborative healthcare systems, and so within your teams, what does the collaborative setup look like? I mean, I saw what is happening in the hospital, because those are some of the things where you don't have integrations. Then some of the work that is done just sort of maybe makes the work harder rather than easier. How have you gone about that to make it more efficient? Thanks.
So this is a big question. Okay, so our team basically, because the hospital have the need for the AI research and they want to build the AI system, usually the doctor will think, oh, if I want to do this, AI can help me. Usually we discuss with the doctor, and if that is feasible, then we will, sometimes we support the doctor to write like a grant fund, like in United States, the grant fund NIH, in Taiwan is the grant fund National Science and Technology Council. Then after the doctor get the grant, then we have the sponsorship, then we can allocate the resource to do the research together. So our basic principle is we are computer science engineers. We are not an expert in regulation, but we try to do our best to do the system in a way that is security in design, privacy in design, ethics in design, which means you will follow the step-by-step of this system. You will basically follow the regulation and ethics principle that is needed. The federated architecture, for example, because the data stay in the hospital before the data put into the data pool is already being anonymous. So of course, if the doctor follow the step-by-step process, it will secure the privacy and it will not leak data outside the hospital. Because we have the federate, not only the learning, but also the validation steps. So with this validation step, we can also make sure this model is good enough. And after it's good enough in one hospital, the process will we will work with the doctor to try the same AI model in other hospitals. So this is just a lot of small example that we set up the system, we set up the procedure, actually together with the best expert like Dr. Lee in Taiwan. By following those procedures, naturally the AI model will follow the basic guidance. But of course, it will not cover everything. But whenever there's an incident happen or there's a concern happening, we will discuss together. Our team is a little bit different from other teams because we starting from a non-profit, non-government foundation. Therefore, we are doing AI for good. Yeah, so we are doing AI for good. It's not that we are doing AI for profit. So that the mindset is a little bit different. So for all the solutions evolve, it doesn't mean the result will not be profitable. But for all the solutions, before we make sure it's profitable, we make sure it following the ethic and the basic guidance. That's what we are doing here. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, three speakers, for the very wonderful talks. My question is for Ethan. Ethan, I think you have explained the merits and also the ethicality of federated learning is more a decentralized type of operation. So a hospital can be more accountable for their data safety. So they don't need to worry about lots of things about sharing the data. But the trend of the entire commercial competition seems to be the bigger the data, the more powerful the computing capacity, okay? The more efficient way of achieving the goal. So it is a brutal competition commercially. So how can you make sure this ethical and more reliable decentralized operation can beat the centralized type of computing?
So that's a very good question because when I come back to Taiwan from Taiwan, and my previous colleague in Microsoft, we are a big company. We have like a lot of employees. How you can compete with us? I say only one word: trustworthy and trustworthy. Trustworthy means like when I work for Microsoft, we collect all the public data and build a large language model, but that's public data. Therefore, when Sam Elton said, okay, I will train all the data so into ChatGPT, so you guys don't need to do anything because the best AI model belong to me. That's ChatGPT, but I don't agree. Because I work for Microsoft, I know the majority of data is not only public data. So when I work for Microsoft, I know only 5% of the private data is being used and being trained in the public model. And when we talk about healthcare, we talk about financial banks. For those solutions, we need to be very accurate and to be very careful because that will harm humans' privacy, that will harm that will have a lot of legal issues and may cause people die. On this kind of solution, there should be a way we can train, we can validate together, but not necessarily owned by the big company. And how we can make sure this solution is good enough. For example, when Tesla saying, I have achieved the full autonomous driving, can you make sure this autonomous driving can also work in Taiwan? You need to validate. And for all the AI model, a lot of small AI model is being used in the healthcare and financial banks. Of course, a big company will develop a lot of the application. But on the other hand, there are a lot of private sector. They have their own private data. They want and they want to build reliable AI model without leaking those data. The federated approach will be good. And also there's another, because the federated approach, when we say federated learning, the model can aggregate the experience together, which means, for example, we have the Brain Tumor Alliance in Taiwan. We train our AI model based on 22 medical hospitals in Taiwan. After we validate in, for example, NCI and NYU, and you know, different cohort, different population, different practice, and different medical device will cause the difference of the performance of model results. In NCI, we can later build a federated learning project with LAN to validate the result in the hospital and build a new model for LAN. So I would say the model will evolve. It's not one model fit all. For the AI model in a lot of different situation, it need to be fine-tuned and need to adjust and need to re-evaluate. And that is very different from the big tech, big model approach. Yeah, that's what I can understand. And from our experience, in Taiwan, we have a federated validation. We ever heard a lot of different companies say, oh, we have billions of records. Usually, when I ask, where does your data comes from? If they don't answer, we know they are from that country. And we validate the result in Taiwan. Usually, it cannot reach the same performance that we have in Taiwan. Maybe they have a lot of data, but we don't know the quality of data. We don't know how it's been labeled, and we don't know how it is being trained. Then we cannot trust the result until we validate it. So that's echo what Dr. Lee mentions. There will be a lot of big tech companies around the world say they have a big model, they can fit all, but be very careful. It's like a drug. Before you use it, you need to validate it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I know Otmar wants to come back and have one more question, but I think we should just pick up with a question in the chat. So it is for Dr. Cheng Li, actually. And the question there is that when you want to revalidate on the local population, would this impair fairness towards immigrants and people that are coming in? Because if you're only doing it on Taiwanese, on the local, and I'm not even talking about in Taiwan, but if we're thinking about it on a global state, when we're talking about validation, how do we do it? So I don't know who it's from the chat, but thank you very much.
Yes. So if you want to true fairness, unless you get the data from the global, yeah. So but so our approach here is at least you need to get the population representatives. So our design is that you have different level hospitals to form alliance, not only in your own systems or the university hospitals, so that they get out this kind of a population representative. We can check the demographics to the whole populations if they are representatives, and then we think that this is a population representative data can be used to validate. Yeah, but there are still some immigrant, some minorities, still need to be inclusive. Then the hospital side will also need to do another round of local testing. So not only they pass the TFDA, when they go into the hospitals, they need to do the local testing and periodical testings. So that's our design, yeah.
Thank you. It was a very important clarification. Otmar.
Yeah, thank you very much. One more question to Ethan following the question from her, because did I understand you correctly that you can state that the results won by federated learning equal those which you have obtained from a total data set. So when you split down your total data set into the different provinces where you do the federated learning, and then bring them together as one model, does this model give the same result as a model you win from all of that? That's my question to you. And second, I would like to make a comment, and that is about the use of the term secondary use. The Declaration of Taipei does not use the term secondary use. We distinguish between the use in clinical care of individuals, so the usual, and then other uses. Because data is already often one for multiple indefinite use, and especially when we are aiming to have AI models in the future, we will start collecting data to build those models in the beginning, which means there is no primary and secondary use, but it's always multiple and indefinite use. Why do I say this? Because the construct of secondary use sometimes gives ethical openings which we want to avoid. And therefore, we have to be careful with that term. But maybe coming back to your question, my question to you.
Okay, this is a very good question. So in our study, if we have one set of data, we train it in a centralized approach. And we also separate this set of data into different small data set. By then training it in the federated way, we can reach the same accuracy of the model result. And this is very easy to understand. The reason of that is federated. So when we say machine learning, machine training, the data is the experience of human. And the training of the model weight is the experience learned from the data. So using the federated learning means every individual hospital, every individual data set, we have a same AI model learned from the data. But we don't aggregate the data, we aggregate the experience. That's very easy to understand. So when I talked to the former president of the National Taiwan University, Dr. Hsiang-Kuo, so he is the creator of the Taiwan Clinical Trial Consortium with 68 hospitals. He told me when we want to train the best doctor, we ask the doctor to go to each hospital to do the treatment. We don't ask every patient come to National Taiwan University Hospital. So this is the same concept of federated learning. We learn from seeing the patient in different hospitals. We bring back the experience, but we don't bring back the personal data. So that's a basic concept of this federated learning. So if someone tell you, if you want to do a good machine learning result, you need to give me data. I'll put this statement into question. If someone tell you, if you want to get a base AI algorithm, then you need to collect all the centers' data into one center. You also need to put it into question. Instead, we should stay the data in the data owner's premise. So in this way, we can avoid what you call secondary use abuse. Because after federated learning, we have one model. If we want to fine-tune, want to do machine learning again, we still need to ask for permission of the data owner. Because the federated approach, the data owner own the platform inside the hospital. So they need to approve before the new AI model can learn from the data. Yeah, so that's, of course there are some other questions, for example, the defensive privacy issue. Some AI model is too smart, they can remember the data outside and bring it outside the hospital. But those are, we call it defensive privacy issue. We will, in the algorithm, we will also avoid the model learn from the data and bring the personal data outside the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, we're running out of time, but if anybody has a very urgent, burning question to the panel, If not, then I would like to thank first of all, my co-host, Dr. Chiu, and then I would like to thank all the speakers, and I hope we didn't burden you with too many questions, but it was very incisive. I think we have to go back, and we'll have a lot to take from this. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you all of our distinguished speakers for their insightful contributions, and thank you to everyone for your attentive participation. This concludes our program for now. Dinner will be served in this room. Please enjoy. No? Oh, sorry, we also have the conclusion. Sorry.
So it's coming to the end of today. So before I conclude this session, this afternoon session, may I ask all of us give a big applause to all of the speakers in this afternoon. I think we have a very fruitful discussions and idea sharing, and I hope all of you learned a lot of that. And that makes it difficult for me to make the conclusions. I try hard to memorize some things, make it marks, and I hope there is an AI secretary here trying to record everything we discussed. I think that will help in the tomorrow afternoon for the work group discussions. Today's presentation offers a remarkable, coherent process from where the Declaration of Taipei comes from to the ethical challenges it must now address, to how governance and technology must evolve, and finally, how a country such as Taiwan is actively implementing these principles in practice. I want to help you to recall, Professor Snædal reminded us that a declaration was born from the real ethical crisis in Iceland. Its purpose has always been to reconcile two equally important goals. One, protecting personal dignity, autonomy, privacy, and confidentiality. And second, enabling health data and biospecimens to contribute to societal benefit. The historical perspective grounds our vision work in values that must remain constrained even as technology evolves. Our second speaker, Professor Hans, showed that the ethical landscape of 2025 differs vastly from that of 2008. True anonymity is increasingly unstable. Broad consent is insufficient as a standalone solution. Secondary use requires continuous governance, not one-time approval. That is very important, as I will mention later in Taiwan's lawmaking, just 2 days ago. Commercial involvement raises unresolved questions of equity, transparency, and accountability. And his conclusion was very clear, that we can no longer place the entire burden of governance on a single consent moment or a single ethics review. And after the break, Mr. Sanjay, who's from the AWS, demonstrated how ethical principles must be implemented through technical architectures, trusted research environments, the 5 SAFEs framework, encryption, access control, and auditability, and responsible AI shows fairness, explainability, robustness, transparency, governance. And he delivers that the ethical intent must be matched by technical capabilities. Although we really wish you to say more about how we're working on the Amazons, as Jack was asking the questions. And the director, Li Jianzhang from Taiwan, from the NHI, extended today's dialogue by showing how these principles have been institutionalized in Taiwan's national health system. He highlighted the 7 major ethical risks. He has good memories, right? You remember? Even when the PPT has some problems, he can memorize the 7 ethical risks. The autonomy, the opacity, privacy, fairness, accountability, sustainability, and patient safety. I think that is very important in making Taiwan's AI data protection law and use. And he says that how global frameworks are translated to the WTI1 governance principles, which I still do not understand what that is. Taiwan's 3 national AI centers for responsible AI, external validation, and clinical impaction evaluation. And he talked about a federated learning, cross-hospital EMR integration, standardized validation models, and a pipeline moving from model tuning to clinical trials to health economic evaluation and eventually to the reimbursement considerations. He demonstrated that Taiwan is not only discussing ethical AI, Taiwan is building the national infrastructure to make it real. And our final speaker today, Dr. Ethan Du, demonstrated how Taiwan turns ethical principle into practice through federated learning and privacy preserving AI infrastructures. His definition of responsible AI means explainable, traceable, verifiable, auditable, directly aligns with the Declaration's ethical aims. He also highlighted the digital twin framework, multiple center validation, and democratic AI government efforts. Together, these developments shows how ethical ideas, technical design, and democratic values can mutually reinforce one another. So through these speakers and their perspectives, I concluded that a modern declaration of Taipei must first honor its ethical origin in protecting dignity and autonomy. Second, address contemporary governance gaps that consent alone cannot solve. Third, embedded ethics into technology, recognizing that infrastructure shapes outcomes. And fourth, provide pathways for implementation, learning from national examples such as Taiwan's AI governance and validation system. I think this is the bridge connection from principles to governance to technologies and into practice. Today, I would also like to highlight an important development in Taiwan, as I think Director Li Jianzhang has just mentioned. Just 2 days ago, our legislator, Wang Zhenshu Weiyuan, just passed a National Health Insurance Data Set Governance Act. It is a landmark law that establishing a modern, transparent, accountable, and right-based framework for the use of NHI data, for the health insurance data. The new act established a robust governance framework and introduces a clear opt-out mechanism for citizens. Everyone can say, no, you cannot use my data. And it calls to set up a committee that will include not only the experts, but also the patient groups and those who's defending the human rights. They have to be a certain percentage, maybe 70 or 75%. And there's also the gender requirement. So, and the committee was required to review the application for the NHI data use in a certain amount of time. When over the time, you have to review again and apply it again. So I think that in order to strengthen the privacy protections, define rigorous governance mechanisms, and ensure transparent oversight, and require the responsible and social beneficial use of health data. This law represents Taiwan's commitment to the same values we examine today, to protect individuals while enabling high-quality research, building multi-layer government systems, and ensuring that public trust is never taken for granted. And I think that, of course, we learn a lot from the experience from all of our friends and colleagues from the WMA, because the legislator Wang is also the ethical committee chair in Taiwan Medical Association. So he inputs so many of your wisdoms into the lawmaking, and I thank you for that. And after the so academic conclusion, I just want to say that I think it's very meaningful that the discussion begins in Taipei. Taipei is a place where innovation is pursued with a deep cultural appreciation for trust, respect, and community. And even everyday life, even we share the Taiwanese tea during the breaks, or you might navigating the city night market later, or experience the warmth of local hospitality, you will find the same values that guide our ethical commitments. That is respect to others, transparency in interaction, and a sincere belief that relations matters. That is my conclusion for the afternoon session. Thank you.
I'll make it very brief because I think you've done an excellent conclusion and I don't think there's anything left to say after it. But I think what is clear is that we have our work cut out for us. I think that on one hand, it's extremely exciting because we have an opportunity to approach the whole database issue and the whole DOT with so much more knowledge. And really, when they say, the saying is that AI is going to change everything about everything, I think what it's also going to do is probably change the DOT statement as we know it, because there is so many impacts. And there are a lot of dilemmas, and we just touched about a few, and I think that the physicians have always been a proponent of innovation, so I think our members would like us to see how we can enable to move forward and to secure, I would say, a trustworthy, ethical AI system or database collection, storage, and use. And that is our challenge for tomorrow. And I would also like to thank everyone, especially the Taiwanese Medical Association, who've really been great in putting this together. And Brian, for all your help and for your very, very insightful comments. So thank you all.
So don't forget, we still have tomorrow. We'll move on to the principles and frameworks, to the legal governance and trust structures, and that must support them. And thank you all for joining today's conference.